Eventually.
Well, I believe it's time to resume our meeting, and I should have just asked Mike to just stay up there. We're pleased to welcome Mike Cook, who is going to introduce the other folks with him today, and they're going to give us more information about our service centers and the services they provide. Thank you.
Thank you. State Board, thank you for having us. We really appreciate the time and the opportunity that you've given us to share some thoughts and services that the Kansas Service Centers provide to our school districts. Today, I have my parole officer and my undertaker with me. Brad Pepper from Clearwater and Mike Bodensteiner from Greenbush. What I'd like to do is to take 5 minutes and just give you a quick history and structure of the service center organizations, not only on a national level, but on a state level that we have here in Kansas. And then talk a bit quickly about how we're funded, and then some of the big services that we offer. And then I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues, and each of us will take 5 minutes or so to share with you some of the specific services that we provide to the school districts in our areas. And then we've also provided some materials that you can take home and or to the hotel rooms and either give them a read to learn more about us or to start a good fire in the fireplace tonight. So either way. Quickly, a history about service centers. On the national level, there are service centers in 45 states, and there are some 554 agencies like each of ours across the country. These service agencies have been around for almost 80 years on the national level. So we have a national organization who has a presence in Washington, D.C. for us, and they advocate strongly with AASA, the superintendent's organization. And the national organization, it's really a small organization because it truly is made up of the states. And there's actually only 3 people that work for the national organization: an executive director, a CFO, and then one subcontractor. They're governed by representatives from all across the country. Kansas belongs in one of the 4 regions called the Western region, so imagine the map. If you look at Kansas and go everything west, we're in the Western region. And there is a national council that helps govern that agency. AESA is the name of our national group. And on that national council, Kansas has been fortunate to have representation at the table on 3 different occasions. When Rita Cook was at Salina, she was on the council. And in the past, since 2008 through 2017, I've served on the council. So it's good to have Kansas at the table during those discussions. As a state organization, there's KAESA, Kansas Association of Educational Service Agencies. When I first started, which was 19 years ago at ESDAC, there were 12 agencies in Kansas, and today we only have 7. So of those 7, if you were to look at the services they provide most of those services in those 7 organizations. 2 of those organizations focus primarily on special education services. The other 5 are what we like to refer to as comprehensive. So we do everything from health insurance services to professional learning to leveraging copier sales to pencils and paper purchasing for our districts. So you're going to have a lot of services thrown at you here in a few minutes that we do. So it's as wide as you can imagine. How we're funded, real quickly, and I'm sure most of you are aware of this, we receive no tax dollars. So we cannot levy any taxes for our local districts or anything of that nature. We do and are governed just as a school district is governed. We have elected elected board members on our boards, and we meet once a month, just like a school board meets. And those board members come from our member districts. And that's part of all the legislation that was passed to allow service centers to exist. We operate on the free market concept, so what you'll see is we'll be talking about the same services coming from multiple service agencies, and what that does is it helps us keep our pencils sharp so that we can bring to the school districts the best pricing. Flip the coin over and you'll see services that the three of us will collaborate on. And what we do there, we're simply coming together, bringing volume, leveraging that against the vendors, driving the price down, delivering that to our school districts. And so it's a really unique system, and it's there for the benefit of the schools. So that's our goal, is how do we help the school districts. Some of the school districts will belong to multiple agencies. SDAC is located in Hutchinson, and we will actually have districts who belong to not only SDAC, but will belong to Clearwater, that will belong to some of the services that Mike Bodesteiner will share with you from Greenbush. So it's really a district choice and how they choose to get the services they need. But it really allows the district to seek out the services that best fits them and is delivered at the quality they so desire. We are funded on sale of service, so you will see and learn about districts that professional development, for instance, they'll pay a fee of X number of dollars a day to send a teacher to a professional learning opportunity. And some of the districts or some of the service agencies will be higher or lower than others. That's just a matter of how we've established our own individual pricing structures. So that's how we survive. Oh, one other way. Most of us operate with a membership fee. SDAC has a membership, and some of the other agencies do also. Our member districts pay a fee annually to be part of SDAC. For that fee, they get certain services at much reduced prices or certain services that other districts can't access. So, for instance, one that SDAC provides is health insurance. By law, in order to have a health insurance pool, you have to have a bona fide membership established, and so that's how that's done. So you join SDAC, then you get some great health insurance opportunities for you. So in a big picture, 50,000 foot, that's service agencies. One last thing, we do not operate off of boundaries. Some states across the country who have their legislators provide funding to the service centers will also draw the boundaries in which those service centers can operate. In Kansas, fortunately, we don't have that. So we operate all over the state. All of these agencies do. And that's a good thing, because what it does is it helps us, again, quality of service has to be high, pencils have to be sharp, you have to get out there and earn your keep. And that's a good thing for our districts. So Kansas is one of those things, service agency-wise, is a pretty good situation. It gives choice for the districts, it makes the service centers work, and yet we collaborate and even compete, but yet to the benefit of our districts. So that's a big picture of service centers in Kansas. I'm going to turn it over to Brad and let him share some things from the Clearwater provides, down specific stuff, then Mike, and then I'll come back and we'll take questions.
Thank you, sir. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Brad Pepper, and I'm from the Service Center in Clearwater. And I was going to talk to you a little bit about, since Mike already gave us the big picture, one of the things that us as an agency, being in the central region, is that we have really taken on the charge to provide a very diligent professional development strategy for our districts. And the tactic we take with that is that we do offer some workshops at our actual service center, but the majority of our time, probably 90% or more of our time, is our consultants are going out to the districts and providing on-site professional development. Every one of our districts that comes to us, we provide a very comprehensive and very specific plan for them, because every district is different. And so they have different needs, and we try to figure out the best way to meet those needs. And so, for example, we have 5 professional development consultants, and each one of them kind of has a strength. And so based on those strengths, they will go out to districts. And so a district may work with 1 or 2 consultants, or they may work with all 5 of our consultants. It just depends on what their needs are. So we really pride ourselves on trying to provide that in-house need for them through our agency. We can do anything as far as like a curriculum side. We can do the technology side. I know that Rose Kane from Belle Plaine is here, and I hope she doesn't mind that I talk about her district, but Belle Plaine is a member of ours, and one of the things that we've done with them this year specifically is that she came to us and said, hey, we really want to do a one-to-one initiative with technology. And so they utilized our staff to be able to purchase the equipment, get the equipment on the network, and then actually do the deployment. And then they even went one step further and said, hey, we want to create a group of kids who can actually be kind of troubleshooters, IT troubleshooters. And so we are in the process of training a cadre of students for them to actually help with this deployment as well. And so it just depends on what the need is for the district, but we try to provide that cost-effective solution for them. By districts utilizing us, they don't have to have full-time staff members. They may not need that. They don't need someone for the full 180-day contract. They may only need someone for 40 days or 50 days. We have a range of districts who are members who utilize us from anywhere from 6 days to 80 days a year, and they can use that however they want. And so that's one of the best ways for them to really kind of stretch their dollar and get the best benefit from that. So that was what I wanted to share with you is how our member districts utilize us the most. There's other service centers across the state that have other specific things. And Mike also kind of touched on this too, is that yes, we are kind of competitive, but at the same time, we do collaborate a lot. And there may be times where our district might have a need that we don't have someone that has that specific strength that we need. And so I may contact Mike Odenstein or Mike Cook and say, hey, this district needs this. Can I borrow someone to be able to provide this service? And vice versa. They may have someone that needs a specific training on a strategy that they don't have, and so they may contact us and say, hey, we need Lori to come out here and do this training for X district. And so we do utilize each other that way too. But anyway, I just wanted to kind of share that with you. And I'm going to turn it over to Mike, and he's going to share some other strategies that he uses.
Good afternoon. Hey, it is absolutely great to be here. Greenbush is a little bit unique in that we have no base membership fee. Since 1976, districts pay as they go on voluntary programs like Brad and Mike mentioned that meet their own needs. It works for us as their structure works for them and the school districts what they serve. I provided a menu of services, and I'm going to pull out just 2 or 3 that may contrast a little bit. One of the big areas that we're finding in Greenbush growing is an area of administration, administrative support services, payroll processing, helping with budgets, helping with long-range planning, taking a good look at purchasing and how school districts can save money. One of the original 3 programs at Greenbush, interestingly enough, was cooperative purchasing, and it continues to be one of the most viable programs that we offer. We split it up in really 3 areas. One is line item bidding, and that may be something like paper, really targeting a specific item. We are also part of and the second way is a multi-state purchasing co-op that will include, and our top 3 vendors in that area are CDW, technology. All the one-to-one initiatives we've seen tremendous increases in technology co-op purchasing, roofing, and supplies and maintenance has been really a big area, and Conica. But those are our 3 top producers in cooperative purchasing relative to a 25-state consortium. And the last one is food. And it's been interesting. Food purchasing has been on the decline until this year when we awarded, with the help of KSDE, child nutrition staff, a statewide bid through F&A and Concordia. That is on the uptick as well. Right now we have about 37 different purchasing categories. 210 school districts participate in our cooperative purchasing. Now, there's something to that I just want to note. A lot of those districts may not know they are purchasing off of a multi-state purchasing co-op. Dollars don't flow to Greenbush. They flow directly to the vendor based on the bid, which is a little bit of a nuance. The second area I want to talk about science education. Greenbush was really fortunate in 1996 with the support of a charitable trust to build a science center. Includes a rainforest, a production greenhouse, archaeological dig. At that time, we collaborated with Pittsburgh State University and built an observatory with a research-grade telescope. At that time, Greenbush changed. As soon as yellow school buses started driving in our parking lot, we changed. And we became, I think, much more focused on the needs of students. And in the case of science, it is all about making science come alive. It's all about career preparation. Our focus has been in recent years on bioscience. And then in a remodel in 2006, we really felt it was important to focus on bioscience and giving kids really exposure to the careers and the skills that are required in the field of bioscience. And if you're anything like me, that had to start real early. My interest in biology in a lecture hall with 200 other students at the University of Nebraska was not a really big motivator for me. But what we want to do is make science come alive for kids, and increasingly we have revised all of our learning activities, and we'll have about 15,000 kids visit our campus this year. It is all about the new science standards, really focusing on engineering and the skill sets that kids are going to need to understand the career potentials. This year we added an unmanned aircraft that is used for agricultural purposes to analyze plants, and it's unmanned, obviously, but it uses high technology and GPS systems, so we actually have kids planning agricultural missions on our campus. The last thing I want to talk about is school improvement. So much of what we all deal with is school improvement. Professional development, certainly. We've restructured that based on the direction that you have taken relative to school improvement, and really have tried to create a system where each of the 90 school districts that join that particular consortium develop their own model relative to their needs. Professional development, working with other state programs such as MTSS. Data analysis, understanding demographics and where their kids are coming from, but really giving schools the opportunity that you've set the goals for us. Now, how do we help each individual school district achieve those goals? And finally, in terms of direct instruction, distance learning, we've all been involved with distance learning. Currently, today, we'll have about 536 kids take a high school course, everything ranging from advanced placement chemistry and physics to Arabic. And it is a way that we can provide a level playing field across the state of Kansas to ensure that any student can participate in the kind of programs that not only do they find interesting, that will help them prepare for college and careers. So, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
You bet.
Let me share a couple things real quick that we do over at ESDAC that might be a little different. In the folders there that, Brad, would you send the debris down? My marketing department said, hey, take these. And I said, wow, okay, it's a lot. So that'll give you a better idea of what ESDAC does. But professional development, distance learning, all of those things that we try to meet the needs of the districts that you've heard. And but one of the things that SDAC has done is, as you'll notice in there perhaps, is we've started focusing on some of the projects that seem to take a lot of and put a lot of pain on the superintendent's desk. Back when the IRS changed the laws on 403Bs that most employees in school districts are involved in, it became very complicated, and they tried, their whole purpose was to streamline that, make it more like the 401Ks in the private sector. And what that required was, or was going to require, was each school district to get attorneys involved, create plans of action, and so forth and so on. And our superintendents at SDAC asked us to take that off of it, much like we did the health insurance program 20 years ago. And so one of the new programs we've put together is a 403B program. How does that help districts? Well, it saves them all the attorney fees every year. It saves them all of the hassle of trying to stay in compliance with that. We take that and put that under our umbrella and take charge of that for them. So when we start looking for efficiencies and economies of scale, we start to build those types of programs for the back office, if you will. One of the focus points is to try to become an extension of the central office and try to take some of those projects off the plate. Health insurance, 125 benefits, 403B, those sort of things. Another opportunity that came about when college and career readiness definition was provided, one of the things that we looked at was to say, okay, what cuts across all of the standards? What are we looking at? How can we best prepare teachers to prepare kids for their future, not ours? And so one of the things that we've focused on is to try to move all of our professional learning to a learning by doing environment. And so what you will see is very few sit and get type of opportunities. You'll see get up and do it opportunities. And we firmly believe that SDAC is there to help prepare, whether directly or indirectly, learners, teachers, administrators, students especially, for their future, not our future. Because theirs is going to be completely different than what we are involved in. So that tends to be our focus, and a lot of that's in that packet that was passed out, and so I'll just leave that to you for your reading. We have about 10 minutes, it looks like, and so we want to honor that time, and we'd be happy to take questions. We want to leave some time for questions, and these gentlemen can, so just fire away. I know that's a pretty quick overview. So
We have a question from Steve Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As we look down the road and kind of take the long view, I heard someone say that you're market-driven. Essentially, there's a strong market-driven element in what you do. If professional development were to become basically the responsibility of the teacher themselves, and it was more market-driven, and the teacher was responsible for their own professional development, do you see a way forward to continue to do what you're doing, only more so, if it were more market-driven?
And I'll share my thoughts, and I don't know what these guys are thinking, but absolutely, in the fact that we've actually considered that. In that package, you'll see something called self-directed staff development, and what we've done basically is go in and put together courses, and we list them, and the teacher goes in, takes them. There are certain things they have to do to validate the learning, projects they have to turn in. We actually have worked with a couple of the colleges to get the credits awarded for that, so we're all in line with that. I would tell you, a very small audience right now, but it was one of those things that came up, and we said, at least let's build a prototype and start looking at it. So, not a big issue right now, but it's coming. Guys, I don't.
And were there comments from on that issue?
I agree with Mike. I think what we're going to see is a more blended approach, and our online learning and some of the self-direct is a lot like the Spruce Goose. It's big and it just doesn't fly very well. But when it really works is when you have a blended model and you bring people together, because at the end of the day, we're in the people business. Schools are the people business. And so we can blend that online learning, whether it's video-based, with the face-to-face. That really encourages, and that I think that's where we're headed.
Thank you.
Dina Horst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When I was listening to a couple of you, you were talking about members, and I understand that Greenbush is kind of no longer has a membership base, so no one pays membership dues as such. They just can, teachers, administrators can access the professional development at the same cost for all districts.
You know, that's a great question.
Or is there a difference in cost for some versus another?
Depends on the program. And Greenbush was established in '76 with that premise that there would be no base membership fee. You pay as you go. And so we really like to honor that history. Dr. Bob Hatterline, Dave DeMoss, Jack Shireman, former Superintendent Gerard, helped create that structure. So it's really driven. Now, and just to go a step further with your questions, well, our administrative fees are spread across all of our programs. That would include grants and contracts and fees for service or memberships. So each is funded a little bit differently. And so if you have an individual or teacher, if their district is not a member of a given program, just one program, they can still participate. But sometimes there is a little bit added cost because somebody is providing that base fiscal support somewhere. And we've got to be sensitive to that. One great example would be environmental consortium and transportation. We have members, and they're providing the staff development opportunities with that particular membership fee. If you bring in another district that wants to participate and don't pay, they've got to pay a little more to help. Hopefully that helps.
So your membership base is based on service, on
yes.
areas of service, where I'm thinking some of the other service, the way I understand it anyway, some of the other service centers are more based on having a base membership, and then that those members can access any of the services, and then other districts who want to come in may pay a little different fee because they've not paid the base membership.
Yes,
that
we
is
both
that
have some
fair?
basic costs, facilities.
So you all,
we just do it a little bit
because
differently.
you all have an administrative cost that has to be dealt with.
We all have a light bill. We all have facilities. We all have some overhead costs, as any organization does. We just generate those costs a little bit differently. Would that be fair with you guys?
Very accurate.
And from an oversight point of view, how you've got an interesting format. So do you also by service? Is that the oversight? Is, in other words, environmental? You might have a board that has purchased membership in that service, and so they would be the oversight for that service, where the other districts or other centers would have more of a general oversight, a board that is overseeing all of the services. Am I gathering kind of the way maybe your structure is different?
Yeah, we, at SDAC, we have a board of trustees that oversees the 403B. We have, and that's a group of superintendents. And then there's another group, a committee that oversees the health insurance consortium. That's a group of superintendents along with two different health insurance companies. And we literally bring them in to make sure that one's not taking advantage of the other and keep the pencil sharp again. And then we all, we're governed at the top level, the legal level, with our board of directors, which is our school board. So it's
another way to look at that is our boards of education or board of trustees, much like you and a local school board, they're handling personnel policies.
Yeah.
And then we'll have individual advisory committees that look at each and every one of those programs. So we'll have an advisory committee that help drive cooperative purchasing, that award the bids. But they won't have a governing influence over the organization, just that particular program area. And most of those are superintendents, business managers, depending on the consortium. Good questions.
And I'd like to suggest that when you respond, you talk into the mic, because we're audio streamed and we want people out there to hear what you say too, each of you. Okay, Jim McNeese.
I'm
sorry.
Well, that's okay. I was just going to ask you what you see as the efficiencies that you provide for school districts. Obviously, there would be. But can you kind of estimate maybe how much you save school districts?
And
If they would do it all by themselves, how cooperatively?
Well, cooperative purchasing, the 210 school districts saved on average a little over $16,000 last year. Hate to deal with averages because the extremes will throw it off a little bit, but of the purchasing last year, that is one I can quantify very easily.
And that's just with your...
Absolutely. That's just one program. And so on average, 16,000. We have some that saved a lot more than that. We had some that saved a little that maybe didn't purchase as much. And I don't know if you have metrics on, that would be one example.
And I could give you another example just kind of on the professional development side. When districts utilize us for the professional development consultants to come in, instead of each district having to hire a person to provide all the professional development, let's just say, for example, the cost of a professional development consultant for a district might be within benefits around $50,000. But if they can utilize our consultants to come in and work with their district for 10 to 30 days, they could save anywhere from, $30,000 to $40,000 per district. Mm-hmm. And so you take that times all the districts that utilize us. Last year we had close to 40 districts that utilized us for professional development consultants. You take that 40 times $30,000 to $40,000. That's a pretty big efficiency for them. The majority of our districts are rural districts. They don't have the budget to be able to hire people full time, but they can utilize us to have that expertise at their beck and call.
Well, just two real quick ones because I just dealt with them. Health insurance, there's 42 school districts that access health insurance through SDAC. I think, Mike, you have a health insurance pool also. We had a 0% increase last year on our premiums for this coming term. We spent $2.7 million to make that possible. So we reinvested in our districts. That's all through a complicated system that's behind the scenes. So we save that kind of money on that side. 403B, I already mentioned that, but and I mentioned that attorneys, we spend about $20,000 a year in just maintenance on an attorney. If every one of those 34 districts that are in that had to spend that $20,000, there's the savings. So, and those are, and we do professional development stuff and so forth. Our members pay $60 a day for a training. Our non-members $120. So there's a 50% deal there. But again, they pay that membership fee to access that. So,
And I know that Mike mentioned also the distance learning. We do the same thing with our districts, and just being in those rural areas, it's hard to fill those positions for those science teachers and Spanish teachers, Mandarin teachers, whatever. So there's a huge cost savings there when districts can share what they have, because many of our distance learners, they'll have a teacher in one district who's providing, is not only teaching in that district, but is also doing distance learning teaching to 3 or 4 or 5 other districts. And so there's a substantial savings there as well.
Thank you.
Jim McNeese.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, thank you for making the presentation. I hope that you're making this presentation in other places and other venues to get the word out, because you're one of the many best-kept secrets that we have in Kansas. You've saved literally millions of dollars for our districts and provide services, more importantly, for our students that most of these districts couldn't afford unless they had the opportunity to collaborate through your organizations. You've done a great job in the past and doing it right now. What do you foresee as the challenges or what waits us in the future in your area?
Well, Friday, I have the opportunity to speak with the K-12 Efficiency Commission, and some of the specific recommendations, and I think will couch it, is bandwidth is a big challenge for us. The elimination of Can Ed is an interesting dilemma for school districts. I am one, don't believe that districts can connect as easily as they used to be able to. And the other piece about bandwidth and technology is, especially in rural areas, there is not a public service that is not relying on that same pipeline. First responders, fire, police, the medical, all of our medical records in Girard America are going online. So we have to have a stable pipe to do that. I think so. To create areas for efficiency, I think bandwidth. The number one issue, at least for Greenbush, that I see in the next 10 years as I finish my career, how do we recruit and attract the best and brightest? It is not a money issue necessarily. It is about, it's related, but it's about how we continue to build our workforce and to get the best and brightest in education. That's getting tougher and tougher, especially the area of special ed. And the last thing, and I think challenge and opportunity, is changes in systems. Changes in foster care systems have created some real challenges, I think, for school districts, as changes in mental health, how we provide a safety net for kids, changes in psychiatric residential facilities, that we have students that are staying shorter amounts of time. Those students are getting back into local school districts. Those are all challenges and opportunities at the same time that I think are going to help drive the future.
I'll just ditto that.
yeah, I would echo the same. I'd only add one more thing, is that it's going to become a bigger challenge to meet the needs of every single learner on the individual level. And I think this bandwidth issue that Mike talks about is big and it's real. There's no way we're going to get to self-directed staff development unless we have bandwidth. That blended model, that eliminating the substitute and have to come in to send the teacher all the way to Hutchinson, all that can be done, but the big pipe that we're going to need to solve that problem.
I don't envy your position or the positions of local school boards and superintendents. We're all striving to figure out and provide that additional value of service to kids and staff. That value and how we define that's going to look different. If I'm a parent of a student with autism, how I perceive value is going to be different if my student has a real aptitude in music. So we're all trying to figure out how we provide additional value, and it's
it's a challenge, but working together with superintendents and school boards and certainly KSDE, I think Kansas has more reasons to celebrate than not.
Carolyn Campbell.
Thank you. I've appreciated this presentation also, and I was reading the self-directed learning pamphlet, and I saw the name Curtis Chandler, and so that sort of registered. Was he not a Teacher of the Year?
He was. He's currently an employee at SDAC.
Okay, so and that was my question, were these people listed members of SDAC, or was he still in the classroom? So are some of them in the classroom also?
Some are in the classroom, and they're very top-notch teachers, and so we actually collaborate with them to help build the best programs we can.
Okay.
But Curtis, on the other hand, has come to work at SDAC.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sally Cobble.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I too want to thank you, gentlemen, for coming and sharing with us. In my district, we have a service center that I happen to serve on the first board for that service center, and it was set up to help schools be more efficient in dollars and try to come together. I understand. I got to go back to Greenbush. I understand how we got the major board members there because, these districts bought in and were memberships. I don't understand your foundation board if you have memberships in all of these, and I can understand you having these advisory boards. So where do you get your main, I'm sure you said this, but it's not clear to me. How do you get your main board again?
Okay.
Because you don't have membership.
We have the entities that formed Interlocal 609 are 4 school districts in the Fort Scott Community College. Our board members are first elected to their local board.
So we're, okay.
And then appointed to serve on our board.
So it's that interlocal agreement that drives who is on your.
That's
Thank you.
yes.
I was not clear enough. Thank you very much. I hope you were very successful last Friday in visiting with the Efficiency Committee, because I think you guys are, you are part of the efficiency of Kansas, and
It is.
I appreciate it, especially as our department cannot be everywhere.
Well, I think we
So
all
I
enjoy
thank you
really
very
a
much.
nice, a really productive working relationship with KSDE. I was asked, and we shared some notes, had lunch today, and it was, well, what can we do to help service centers? Well, we can help school districts, because what's good for school districts is good for us, and good for Southwest Plains, SDAC, Clearwater, Smoky Hill, Keystone, and Northwest.
So, never mind.
Kathy Bush.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also really appreciate your presentation talking about the service centers, the services you provide. I think really all of Kansas needs to know more about the efficiencies that you help provide for our schools. You mentioned that a couple of the service centers focus primarily on special ed. Which are those?
That'd be out at Oakley.
Okay.
Danny Thornton's operation out there primarily focuses on
Okay.
that, and that's originally the way Keystone, which, what was the previous name? I don't know. I can't remember. They changed names here.
They changed as a,
But that was their primary focus also.
okay, so originally that was their primary focus. Now they're doing some other things also. Okay, so primarily the Oakley one and then some at Keystone, and because that I just continue to see that being a big support need throughout the state as we continue on.
In Greenbush, of our certifieds, about half of our certified staff are special in the area of special ed, and that would include teachers, administrators, speech and language, OT, PT, really a lot of low incident services that will have special ed co-ops collaborating and creating consortiums to deliver a specific service.
Okay, so you provide services, then do you also provide some professional development for special ed teachers?
Absolutely.
Okay, so you do a little bit of both then.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Not a special ed co-op, but really more of a low incident type arrangement, whether it's a special day school operating a program in a PRTF, a psychiatric residential facility, really and dealing with some of the behavioral challenges that our kids have.
Well, and one of you mentioned the mental health needs of many of our students, and with fewer state services, that's a continuing larger and larger issue. So the support that service centers provide, I think, is really important to our district. So I think that's a great thing that's available.
And the one thing, certainly Greenbush embrace, we haven't touched on the early childhood pieces.
Okay.
Expanding parents as teachers, preschools. I feel very, very strongly that we have got to do better with Medicaid in areas like speech and language and teletherapy, and opening up some codes, and I'll talk a little bit about that on Friday to the Efficiency Committee too. So if they're listening, I'm sure they're waiting with bated breath to find out what else I have to say. So anywho, I think there are some opportunities for us out there.
Yeah, well, and I'm glad to hear you're going to the Efficiency Committee, I think, to talk about the services, because you guys have a phenomenal amount of services available.
Thanks.
So thank you.
Ken Willard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You mentioned a couple of you at least provide health insurance purchasing services. Is it just the two service centers that do, or do all of you?
We do some purchasing. We do not have health insurance. We don't offer that.
Yeah.
SDAC does, and I'm not sure if Green. Do you do?
We do, and there have been days that you can have ours.
Okay. That's why we don't do it.
Yeah.
I may have missed some of your comments regarding that, but I'm just wondering if we're getting maximum utility out of those services, or if I don't understand why any school district would not participate unless they can buy it at a lower price somewhere. So is there a way to better leverage your ability to provide savings by working together and increasing getting even greater buying power?
But we're actually working on that currently right now. You want to talk about Compass or Canvas?
Yeah, we in fact, as Mike said, we had lunch together, and we were collaborating on a major piece of software to bring back into the state at the K-12 level to replace one we're currently using. In our discussions with the company, it makes a lot of sense for the three of us to pile it all together and use that leverage. It doesn't make sense for us to be competitive with each other. And so I guess what I would say that is there's times it makes a lot of sense for us to compete, and there's times it makes a lot of sense for us to collaborate and bring it together. As for the health insurance and why, I've actually had some districts who have applied into the health insurance pool at SDAC. We run the rating on them, we get the numbers back, and those numbers just don't make sense for them to join the pool. And so they'll stay where they're at.
Because of the demographics of their...
Demographics, wellness of their group, size of their group now with the current Healthcare Reform Act. And it just doesn't make sense for them to jump in. It would actually cost them a little bit more. So we recommend they stay, and then when it does make sense, come in. So I guess it comes down to, not to interrupt you, sir, but it comes down to it's still at that local school board level decision and superintendent decision to make those purchasing moves.
So each of these individual school districts are handled as their own separate group? For health insurance?
Well, we're handled as a pool, but we leave as much in our pool. It's a consortium of 42 school districts, but each district has certain things they can determine and decide within their district what to offer. Like we have some districts who will have a plan for certified, non-certified, and retired. Others will have for certified and retired certified, and so we allow all that to be individualized at the local level. What we do is create the ultra structure for it to exist in. And then we take all of those together, and that's how we get the ratings and all that.
Thank you. One other question. Are there any other services that you have the capability of providing that you're not now? And I'm thinking the one that comes to mind is payroll. That takes up a lot of time and expense for every school district. Can that not be done centrally somehow? Do you have an ideas about that?
Yeah, we are providing payroll services for school districts. Yes.
And and
a community.
That represents a savings to everyone, right?
Yes. It's timing and opportunity on the payroll. It continues to grow for us very, very quietly, and I think in a way that it's supposed to grow. It's a challenge in the sense that, and there's going to be some remarks. I'm going to talk a little bit about this on Friday too. Is each of those school districts, community colleges, are so different in terms of payment schedules, fringe benefits, and how they handle fringe benefits. I think that's an opportunity for the future, but I think it's going to grow over time, probably not real fast. One of the biggest challenges for payroll in local school districts is making sure all your payroll taxes are being paid. I mean, it's really getting complex. So one of the recommendations, another recommendation that John and I are going to make with as part of the MAPS accounting system is the fact that we've got to recognize that board clerks and treasurers, we need to ramp up professional development for those folks. And they are critically important positions, but there's not been the level of training that maybe need be. And I would include somebody like me. We have a large budget, but I don't come from an accounting or CPA background. So additional training for administrators is really important. As instructional leaders, they're also operating a large business in their community. Hate to use the word business, but a large organization within a community.
I understand. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Well, again, thank you for being here with us today. I think we all have learned something more about each organization, and that's important to see your diversity, but yet your cooperation. So thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us. Thanks, Travis.
Okay, Brad Nguyen-Swander's going to introduce our next presentation.
Okay, thank you. And as those three individuals are leaving, I just want to, one thing that wasn't mentioned about the service centers, which is a huge value to us at the State Department. Whenever we do large-scale initiatives across the state, it's nice to know that there's an association, and I just call them, they come together, and they help this agency roll out large-scale initiatives like communication. They have someone serving on our professional learning team. So anyway, it's a huge service they provide to this agency across the state. The next item is a presentation on pedagogy. So if our staff would like, or invited guests would like to come on forward, they are a humble group. But we have Dr. Thomas Vance from K-State, Jeff Baxter from Leavenworth School District. We have Jennifer Smith from the Blue Valley and Marnie Hay from Mays. And they'll introduce themselves a little more detail when they get up, but we're going to start with Dr. Vance, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting us. I'm Tom Vance. I'm from Kansas State University. And we're here today to talk about pedagogy. And each of us will give you our perspective on what that means. And we're going to try to save a little bit of time at the end for questions. And and conversation. I drew the short straw, so I'm going first, but it doesn't necessarily mean that what I have to say is any more important than my colleagues. Before I start, let me begin by publicly thanking Sally Cobble for coming to Kansas State University a few weeks ago. She did an excellent job of presenting to both of my classes. I'd like you to know, Sally, that I added a quiz question based upon your ideas, and most of the students got it right, so they were paying attention. So pedagogy is, and by the way, I'd also like to invite, really any of you that would like to come to K-State, to Kansas State, to see what we do in terms of teacher preparation. You're invited anytime, and we would love to host you. Let me begin our brief talk on pedagogy by taking you back to when I was a student teacher 23 years ago. And I can remember when I was student teaching in Waverly, Nebraska, coming home at night and being completely exhausted. And I wasn't physically exhausted, I was mentally exhausted. And for me, pedagogy, although there's a simple definition, the art, science, and profession of teaching, as we all know as educators, it's much more complex than just that. Every day, teachers at every level, elementary through graduate school, face really scores of decisions. We face decisions before we teach. We face decisions during teaching. We face decisions after we teach. And we face decisions in terms of what we're going to teach, how we're going to teach it, how we're going to assess it, and how we will manage the classroom. We face decisions about individual students. We face decisions about whole classes or whole groups of students. Really great teachers make the best decisions. Really great teachers have well-developed intellectual frameworks that allow them to make outstanding decisions. And although I can't speak for everyone at Kansas State University, I can speak for myself in saying the single most important educational variable that we at least can control is the quality of our teachers. The more teachers know and are able to do and feel, the better off they are in terms of performing their roles with students. I've tried to reduce my ideas about my life's work in teaching to a single page so that you can more clearly see the kinds of things that we tried to do at Kansas State University. We really do believe that we are a partner with KSDE, with the state board, and of course with teachers and school districts. And I won't talk about each of these things, but they're there for you to review. And should you have any questions about any of those things, I actually have lectures on each one of these things, so I'm prepared to answer those questions. I think that's a little overview, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues who will give you their perspectives from the classroom.
I drew the second straw. Orlando walked into my senior English class and announced, "I hear that you're a good teacher, but I just wanted you to know I don't read." And I went, what am I going to do with this? And then he said, "And oh, by the way, I don't write either."
I could have put him on a computerized instructional reading program, complete with performance standards, lessons, and activities. I could have given him workbooks with all kinds of progressive lessons, charted his progress, mapped his course, recorded everything he did. But I knew neither one of those would work. He needed more. He needed motivation. Knowing that he loved basketball, I gave him the book, The Greatest Game Ever Played. It was the story of the Kentucky-Duke regional basketball final in 1991, where the lead changed hands 7 times in the last 2 minutes. It was not on our reading list. It was not what anybody else in class was reading, but I gave it to him, and he read it in 5 days. He'd never read a complete book in high school. He wondered if I had anything similar. Pedagogy is how the teacher interacts with the student. It's how the teacher and student work together. It's how you make learning relevant. It's how teachers approach inquiry. Orlando went on to read The Miracle of St. Anthony, about the legendary basketball program in New Jersey. He read The Jordan Rules, about Michael Jordan. And The Life of Riley was the last book I gave him before Thanksgiving, because it's written by a Sports Illustrated writer, Rick Riley, that is just an exceptional writer. Finally, before Thanksgiving, I gave him All the Pretty Horses by Cormac McCarthy. I told him that this was not a book about basketball or about sports, but a book that I thought would make him think. I decided to give it a shot, and he read it. Pedagogy is developing tools of thought with students, literacy. It's engaging them with challenging and relevant connections. It's figuring out the ways to help them grow. It's beyond content. It's the art of what real teachers do and how they do it. It's chronicled and explained in 3 books that I've read in the last 6 months. The first one was How the Brain Learns by Anthony Sousa, and it's about how we are learning how things happen in the brain. The other 2 books that I've read that I highly recommend, and I've been asked a number of times over this year, what are the books that I recommend that people read about education? One is called How Children Succeed by Paul Tough. It's an astonishing book. It's eminently readable. If you care about how students learn, this is a book that you must read, How Children Succeed by Paul Tough. And the other book that just came out in the last several months is Building a Better Teacher by Elizabeth Green, journalist. And she chronicles the incredible program that's going on in the Michigan colleges and universities, identifying those specific qualities of pedagogy that make great teachers. It's the key to what we do in the classroom. I arrange my class in groups of tables. Some of you may have seen pictures of my classroom. They've been widely disseminated. It's not how I taught a number of years ago at all. But I've learned, as I've really examined in my heart what students need to do to learn, they need to collaborate daily. They need to problem solve daily. They don't need my lectures. They need to discover answers, where my role is inspiring, motivating, providing the expert advice, providing the direction of how they can do things. One of the novels that I teach is Moby Dick. And I can't tell you how many times I've had people say, "Are you kidding me?" But it is the novel that inspired me to become an English teacher. And I do things with it that inspire students to see in that novel, written in 1851, things that relate to what's going on in the world today. and they don't see Ahab, okay, they see Saddam Hussein. They see Adolf Hitler. They see incredible evil and how it manifests itself even today. And oh yes, Orlando ended up reading Moby Dick. Teaching is different than any other profession. Other professions that I have been involved in, you begin at the basic level when you start. And as you get expertise at that level, then you're given more responsibility, and you move on up. That does not happen in a classroom. Whether you have taught 1 year or 10 years or 30 years, when you walk into a classroom, you're on. You're on. We need to pray that our colleges and universities are doing something and articulating pedagogy to prepare teachers to meet this kind of world that we're going into. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be with you today. My name is Jennifer Smith, and I teach at Lakewood Middle School in the Overland Park region in Blue Valley Schools. And I wish I could capture the look in people's eyes when they find out that I teach middle school. Most people cannot understand my desire to spend 16 of my 20 years in education teaching young adolescents. There's even a saying among middle school teachers that I teach middle school. What's your superpower? While I wear these strange looks as a badge of honor, I cannot imagine doing anything else than bringing our nation's past alive for 13 and 14-year-olds so that our history doesn't seem so far away or insignificant. But I have to admit, it does take a specific set of skills, maybe not superpowers, but a specific growth mindset to enter the world of the middle school. To be an effective middle school teacher, I must have a firm grasp of the rich content that I am tasked with teaching. It's essential for me to have a deep understanding of the educational benchmarks for which my students are held accountable. But without an understanding of middle school pedagogy, how to orchestrate a classroom, and I really like that metaphor, how to orchestrate learning in a classroom, a teacher's vast content knowledge can be lost. Today, my remarks will focus on 2 areas of middle school pedagogy. First, how to engage the middle school learner in that rich content, and 2, how to meet the specific developmental needs of a middle school child. Benjamin Franklin said, "Tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn." Middle school students need teachers trained in how to engage students in content, how to involve students in their learning. First and foremost, a middle school teacher teaches kids. Content must be made relevant for the middle school learner. Lessons have to be built with the kid in mind, the specific developmental and psychosocial needs of an adolescent learner. Jennifer Bailey, one of the other members of our Teacher of the Year team in 2014, says it this way: "Gone are the days where the teachers are the sage on the stage. Gone are the days of lecturing and espousing content knowledge while students frantically take notes. Instead, I am tasked with making American history sticky, creating learning experiences that make history relevant and meaningful to my students." In my 8th grade social studies classroom, that pedagogy includes the 5E constructivist framework, developing lessons that engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate to allow my students to use and build on prior knowledge and experience, to construct meaning, and to continually assess their understanding. This year, my students have arrived at Ellis Island, and we have gone through the medical and legal inspections, just as immigrants did at the turn of the 20th century. We've analyzed primary sources, including the New York City Tenement House Act of 1901, to evaluate how much the Progressive Era really brought change to America. We've been yellow journalists just this last week, looking at the explosion of the USS Maine in Havana Harbor in 1898. And I'm sure you can tell within this content specific pedagogical training in literacy is essential. Literacy is at the heart of every content. We are all teachers of literacy. Students must be able to read, write, and communicate in all subjects. Without proper training, teachers will not be able to help students develop these literacy skills needed to succeed in the 21st century. The second point of middle school pedagogy is the most essential. For any learning to occur in any classroom, the unique intellectual, social, and developmental needs of the adolescent must be met. Psychological research continues to validate that if a child's basic needs are not met in the classroom, learning cannot occur. This year, 135 teenagers walk through my classroom door every day. 135. As I greet each of them daily with a smile and a handshake, I want them to recognize that I'm there to do more than teach history. I'm there to recognize that they have a different learning style, and I'm going to do my best to personalize student learning for every single one of those 135 students. I want them to know that I am a teacher that's going to meet their needs, to understand how their adolescent mind works, to get to know each of them as individual people. My students need teachers prepared in effective classroom management strategies, so classrooms are places where people feel safe and comfortable, where respect and cooperation are expected and felt by all of my students. Research continues to point to these things for the middle school learner, that they need approval and opportunities to find success, that they need to experience fairness above all, opportunities for their voices to be heard, to experiment with their learning where failure is an option, to make connections with their peers, create personal meaning, and to engage in meaningful work. And this is a tricky one at the middle school level because you have to build ways for them to feel autonomy while at the same time them having a sense of belonging with the group. Facilitating a classroom of 8th graders, and 30 at that, meets these needs, and meeting these needs is challenging. My students need teachers that are trained in how to orchestrate this classroom learning, to create classroom environments where every student can thrive. Last year, the focus at my middle school in Overland Park included the S Superman symbol. There's a scene in a recent Superman movie where Lois Lane is interviewing Superman, and she asks, what does the S stand for on his uniform? And Superman replies it's not an S, that it stands for hope. We spent the year learning about this concept of hope, a concept that Gallup data proves is a better predictor of future success than ACT score or GPA. We dedicated our year to becoming super empowered, hopeful people, helping our students visualize their futures and navigate any obstacles they might find in their paths. My middle school is a committed staff, a group of people working tirelessly to engage young adolescents in their learning, to care for their well-being, and to help create hope for their futures. Preparing highly effective middle school teachers is imperative for our state. Our children deserve the absolute best. Middle schools in Kansas need to be filled with superheroes, highly skilled educators trained in the content they are tasked with teaching, but just as importantly, have the powerful pedagogical skills needed to help adolescents develop into the young men and women they were destined to be. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Marnie Hay. I'm a 4th grade teacher at Prairie Woodman Elementary in Mays, Kansas. And I want to thank you for inviting us to come and talk about our passion and our careers teaching. I've been in elementary education for 20 plus years. I've worked in the classroom as a 1st, 2nd, and 4th grade instructor, and have worked outside the classroom as an instructional coach, a person who helps facilitate and present professional development to teachers in order to enhance the learning that takes place in the classroom. I have been blessed with countless opportunities to improve teaching, and without these opportunities, I would not be standing in front of you today. It has been said that all you have to do is make learning fun. True and false. Everyone involved, adults and children, should enjoy what is taking place in the classroom. But just because it is fun does not mean it is meaningful or mastered. Pedagogy is the science of teaching. It is more than just mastery of content, understanding of standards, or implementation of assessments. While those are all vital parts to an effective educator, those items alone will not make success happen for every student in every classroom. When you walk into my classroom, you will see my students sitting in groups of 4. I use data to strategically place students in specific groups based on their abilities and on their knowledge of the subject or standard. I have also spent time building relationships with each student so that I know their particular learning styles and can place them with other students that complement their strengths and weaknesses. Multiple teaching techniques happen during my lessons during core instruction. If learning is to take place, then students must actively be engaged and personally involved. In a 60-minute core math lesson, you will see students using whiteboards to show their learning and then sharing that learning through cooperative learning structures. You will see skills reinforced through card games and dice games. You will see direct instruction using various technologies such as the Promethean board and Chromebooks. Students will write about their math thinking in a math journal. Students will fill out an exit ticket that helps me get a snapshot of mastery or misunderstandings, and that knowledge will help guide my instructional decisions for the next lesson. When you walk into my classroom, you will see students focused and working independently, and students collaborating with peers. These things happen simultaneously in my room. In order for this to happen, I model what the learning environment should look like, with lessons on respect, active listening, and responsibility. And we practice and review the expectations throughout the year. I call the conversation between peers productive noise. This type of classroom cannot happen without a clear understanding of effective classroom management techniques. When you walk into my classroom, you will see intervention time and differentiated instruction. This 30-minute daily time is used for enrichment, practicing, and reteaching. There will be students working independently on a skill that is challenging. There will be partnerships practicing a skill they understand but have not yet mastered. There will be a small group of students working with me because they are still struggling with a concept. But I'm not merely reteaching what they have already seen. Since I have built the relationships and know the students' strengths and learning styles, I am able to use a variety of techniques to show the same skill, but from a different perspective that will bring new meaning to the concept. When you walk into my classroom, you will see me taking a back seat and allowing the students to be the teacher. Math is my passion, so in my 4th grade math class, I tell the students, it is not enough to know the right answer. You need to be able to explain how you got the answer and the math concept underlying the problem. Because I have established a judgment-free arena where students are confident to share their ideas and their answers, whether those answers are right or wrong, my students jump at the chance to be the teacher. They stand in the front of the room, model their knowledge, and share their learning with their peers. All of those scenarios take place in my classroom every day and require much more than just content knowledge. In addition, Philip Jackson, a researcher and author of the book Life in Classroom, states that elementary teachers have 200 to 300 exchanges with students every hour, most of which are unplanned and unpredictable, calling for teacher decisions, if not judgment. That is pedagogy. That is the science of teaching. At all times, I am the facilitator, and I help direct the learning. Every moment is well thought out and deliberate from my perspective, and my experience and training prepare me for the unexpected. And if it looks flawless, it can be construed as easy, but easy is far from the truth. Now, in order for me to maximize learning time in the classroom, I have to be an expert at my craft, and that only comes through constant reflection and learning. As I stated before, I have been an educator for more than 20 years, but consider myself still a student of education. Every year brings new ideas and experiences that make me reflect on what I know and guide me to seek out help in what I don't know. When I spent my time as an instructional coach, I helped teachers find answers to problems they could not solve, and I showed them how to become an even better teacher than they knew they could be. I provided training, encouragement, skills, strategies, and advice. I think what pedagogy comes down to is not about the teacher, but about the countless lives teachers impact with their words, knowledge, understanding, compassion, and expertise. Teachers with pedagogy skills move students beyond paper and pencil, beyond a scripted teacher's manual. Teachers' knowledge about best practices and effective strategies is crucial for meaningful learning to take place. Teachers must be able to adjust instruction, use data to guide instruction, and engage all learners every minute of the day. To place a person in a classroom that simply has content knowledge hinders the learning and does an injustice to the students that need a teacher that can adjust at a moment's notice to diverse learners and diverse learning styles. Teaching is the hardest profession that everyone thinks they can do. We owe it to our students to give them teachers that are well-rounded and trained and know how to make the most of every learning moment in the classroom. Thank you.
Wow. I know there will be questions. I would like to begin with one. It's obvious that you are all excellent teachers and educators. And you've heard people talk about teachers and say, oh, well, that person's just a natural-born teacher. You've heard that said. But I'm wondering, in your own experience, how much of what drives you and makes you a good teacher is due to something innate that you were kind of like born with, and how much of it is due to training and education that you've had that gives you some skills to use. So could you answer that question?
I'll give it a shot. I do believe that teaching is a calling. I do believe that. But I can tell you, as one who has been called, I'm still learning, and I've done this a long, long time. And I'm still so motivated by seeing the light go on in students' eyes. I used to be a basketball coach, and I could tell if my team was ready to play the game just by looking at their eyes. I see the same thing in the classroom, and that's motivating. It's what can I do to get it on for this student? If this student is struggling, what do I need to do to bring it alive for them? So I guess the answer in my view anyway is both.
Thank you.
I would say that training has a lot to do with it. I thought about adding this in my speech, but when I first started teaching, I was not a good teacher. And I would apologize to my first class because I was not a good teacher. And I've had countless opportunities to have professional development or training. And as an instructional coach, I've been able to go in and see teachers in classrooms. And I think what it comes down to is the only experience that we have before we set foot in a classroom is as a student, and we observe teachers. And like I said, it looks easy, and it should look easy and flawless if they're doing it right. So I think sometimes, you think, well, I can do this. I mean, I've been in school for 12 years. This is something I can do. But when you actually put yourself into the classroom and into that situation and all of the things that you have to deal with on a constant basis that you're not even aware exist as a student, I think that's where the training comes in. And a good teacher, like I said before, would reflect on that and realize that, hey, this is not a strength of mine, and if I want to do what's best for my students, then I need to find some help or some training or some understanding so that it is flawless and my kids are getting the most out of it that they can. So
thank you.
In my view, teaching is both art and science, and in fact it's mostly art, but that doesn't mean that it's natural. That doesn't mean that you're just born with it. A friend of mine, his granddaughter is considered one of the top violinists in the world. And certainly she had some natural talent with regard to playing the violin. but she's also worked countless hours practicing her scales, learning about music, learning about interpretations of music, learning about styles of music, learning about how to perform in front of an audience so that she can be her best. So while there are some personality traits, and research even supports that there are certain personality traits that lend themselves to teaching, things like enthusiasm, warmth, humor, and so forth, that doesn't mean that we don't also need as teachers a framework of skills and dispositions and knowledge, not only content knowledge, but pedagogical knowledge as well.
Thank you. Would you like me to comment? I'm going to feel like Mr. Baxter here for a minute, but I too am reading a book right now by Carol Dweck, a Colombian researcher who from the University of, or from Columbia University, that talks about growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And I think I'm maybe more of a little more fixed mindset than I think I am, in the sense that if I were to just believe I was born a great teacher, that's a fixed mindset because it shows that I don't have anywhere to go or grow. But I truly believe that teachers have to be of the growth mindset, that we have to have that mindset for our students, but that we also have to have that mindset for ourselves. I remember in the defense of my master's thesis, one of the professors on the committee said, "How do we bottle what you have and give it to other people?" And yet, to me, that's a fixed mindset. That I just have something innate, rather than it being a growth mindset of here's where I am now, but here's where I can go as a teacher, and here's what I can do to meet the needs of my students. So that growth mindset piece of we've all got ways to go, we continue to learn every day, is certainly a big part of pedagogy.
Thank you. Now, are there other questions? Well, that was just amazing. Thank you so much. Oh, I missed one. Ken Willard. Sorry, Ken.
You didn't miss it. I was just late getting it on.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your presentations. I will just say honestly, great presentations by some great teachers and educators, but I frankly don't know what to do with a presentation like this, because all we get is one perspective on the issue. And it's not that I have a better idea, but I just would like to hear from maybe another perspective. And here's part of what let me ask a question about at K-State or at any of the institutions that prepare teachers. How much of that experience involves pedagogy training?
Well, that differs for elementary or secondary teachers. For example, in our elementary program, and when you say pedagogy, we don't just, even in our education classes, it's not reduced to just cooperative learning. It's cooperative learning for a purpose, or inquiry learning for a purpose, or using technology for a purpose. And but our elementary teachers, for example, take blocks of education classes, and we have 3 blocks before student teaching, and each one of those blocks has 12 to 15 hours of credit in it. For our secondary teachers, they don't have as much formal education classes. They have more content classes. But even our secondary teachers will have core teaching skills, and they'll also have a methods class, and then they'll also have an education foundations class where they also talk about pedagogy and teaching.
Well, I have a lot of members of my family who are teachers, and I have one who just started in a teaching position in Missouri, and another nephew who's going to Emporia State right now. And so I don't discount at all the importance of pedagogy, but it seems to me, and I could be completely wrong, but it seems to me that is a skill that is learned more by doing than by instruction. Approximately 300 years ago, Benjamin Franklin was 10 years old, and he had completed his 3 years of formal education. And he was about to run off to sea, or his dad thought he was, and so his dad collared him and took him around over a several months period of time to all the artisans in the area to find out what he liked and what he thought he might like to be involved in. And he ended up apprenticing to a brother who was 20-some years older than him in a print shop. And then we know I think that's all the education that he had. But we know the amazing accomplishments of Benjamin Franklin. But he learned all that mostly by doing. And that maybe is not a really good analogy, but it seems...
I think it's an excellent analogy.
Yeah.
And in fact, at Kansas State and at all the colleges and universities, we realize the importance of practical experiences, and that's the reason why, for example, the elementary teachers at K-State have 3 different experiences out in the schools, because that's an important part, we believe, in building that foundation of knowledge and skills and dispositions that will help them to become a great teacher. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like my father-in-law is a carpet and tile layer and has been a carpet and tile layer for 50 years. And when he comes into a new hotel room or a new environment, he sees things about the carpet and tile that the average bear doesn't see because he has so much experience, so much knowledge. He has a frame of reference to judge that carpet and tile. What we try to do at Kansas State is build a frame of reference that will help new teachers, beginning teachers, view the classroom environment, interpret the classroom environment, interpret things about kids. And just as all these teachers have pointed out, every day there are literally hundreds of decisions. My wife is a teacher's aide at Central Elementary in Wamego. She's been a teacher's aide for 10 years, and she still marvels at how teachers, kindergarten teachers, can take kids from various backgrounds with various degrees of preparation who really don't know how to blow their nose on the first day of school and take them to being full-blown readers by the end of 9 months. For me, that's not accidental. That's because those people have been educated as teachers, and they know something about the profession of teaching. They know something about kids. They know something about content. They know something about how to motivate 5-year-olds that the average bear doesn't understand.
Well, yes, thank you. And my comments are not, I don't want to be understood as critical in any way of the importance of pedagogy, but I can't tell you how many times I've heard, and I heard it today from Marnie, that her first year of teaching, she was not a good teacher. I've heard that over and over and over, but I don't hear from veteran teachers about how poor a teacher I am. So they've learned that from the time they got out of school until they are at the level where they are. So for me, Madam Chair, this presentation would have been more helpful to a non-educator like myself if I had been able to hear also from some maybe students fresh out of school and find out how prepared they felt like they were when they began this year. I had an experience just a few years ago with one of my grandkids' class, a young lady who was a teacher just out of the university, and she was not prepared in any way. She was not prepared in content or in pedagogy. She couldn't manage the classroom, and she was woefully lacking in content. And I learned that just by visiting the class and would hear her teaching things that were not accurate or not in the proper order, or just they were confusing to kids. And I even was so concerned about it, I tried to gently whisper to her, off the side, this maybe you didn't notice this or whatever. Now, to the credit of the school, she wasn't renewed the next year, but she had just come out of the university and had all this pedagogy training, but somehow was not prepared. So I think it could be educational for all of us to hear from that side of this spectrum.
But doesn't that, with all due respect, doesn't that happen in any profession? I mean, aren't there lawyers that graduate from law school that are underprepared, or they don't perform their best right when they? I think the same could be said for almost any profession. I think if you asked a bunch of architects, veteran architects, they would tell you that they design better houses now than they did when they were fresh out of school. To me, that's just the nature of being a human and experiencing whatever profession you're in. You get better and more efficient, and that's natural.
That's a point well taken, and I don't intend to be argumentative at all, but just my perspective is this, that content is even more important, or at least as important, mastery of the content.
I agree.
And sometimes I think we're lacking there, because, I mean, I see things come home from teachers that are written to parents or grandparents that are atrocious and just scare me to death that I've got a kid sitting in this kind of an environment. So,
just to be clear, I agree that content is important, and the more teachers know about content, the better examples they're able to use, the better, the more motivating they can be. All of those things.
Yeah,
absolutely, content is critical. I certainly hope that wasn't something that I was conveying in any way, that content is not as important as pedagogy, and perhaps even more important, because it's critical. That's why at my age of 66 and having taught well over 30 years, I read voraciously. Every time I teach a novel in my classroom, I reread that novel every time. Must tell you too, I am lucky to be standing here because 2 weeks into my first year of teaching, in 1971, I thought I was going to be fired from my job. I had goofed up that bad in the classroom, and I thought I was that bad. I came from Kansas University, where I had 8 weeks of student teaching. I don't remember hardly having anything that I would refer to as pedagogy at the time. And I talked just last Thursday, I did a presentation with Greenbush at the Service Center in Eudora. And we had teachers from Pittsburgh State, and I was talking with them during a break. And I'm hearing the things that they are doing now before they ever go out into the classroom that was amazing to me. And as he was sharing about the opportunities they have to get in and out of the classroom, to observe and to see, what is that for if it's not to begin to get some feel for what happens in a classroom, to begin to think about that, to have opportunities to discuss with experts what they observed and what they saw and how they can incorporate that. It is not an easy thing to say, okay, we push this button or that button. If it was that easy and all it was required that you be an expert, KU would be ranked #1 in the nation right now in basketball. But clearly 4 of their superstars are coming in way deep off the bench. Why? Because it's different being an expert in basketball and being an expert in basketball at the Division I level. And it's the same thing in the classroom.
Thank you.
Can I say something?
Sure.
I think that it's unfortunate that sometimes that maybe you see experiences or you see teachers that maybe you don't feel are doing the best that they possibly can in the classroom, and that's unfortunate, and that's unfortunate in any profession. When I think about the preparation that it takes to come into a classroom before the first day that you walk into the room, if it's just the content knowledge that you have, I wouldn't even know where to begin with setting up a classroom or doing all of the behind the work things that it takes to make a classroom successful. And I guess my personal fear is that someone who doesn't have at least a building block foundation of understanding for that is going to spend countless time trying to figure that out, which will take away from the content knowledge or the understanding or the mastery that could be happening in the classroom. That's my personal fear of somebody who just kind of walks in. And I've had many people in my life say, well, that teaching's easy. I can teach. And I've offered many times, I mean, my husband to be one, and say, come in my classroom and teach. If you think you can do it, come in and do it. And I've never once had anybody take me up on the offer.
And you won't.
Why is that? I mean, that's my question.
I don't suffer any illusion that what you do is easy. I'm amazed at what good teachers are able to accomplish, and I couldn't do it. I don't have the mental or the emotional makeup to do it. I think I'm much too impatient. So I appreciate it, and I value it. But I struggle with this heavy emphasis on the value of pedagogy, because it seems to me that everybody gets better by doing. You don't get better by being taught. You get better by doing. And so I think pedagogy is a growing kind of thing for the most part. Now, I'm sure you can learn some basic skills in school, but obviously you've all said you continue to learn. So I'm just wondering if the balance is right in the schools of education between mastery of content and pedagogy. I don't know the answer to that question, but that is my question. So thank you very much.
Jim McNeese.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your presentation. And I want to go on record. Marnie Hay was not a terrible first-year teacher. I think I hired you.
It's not a great.
You were not a great teacher. But you know, good teachers, great teachers look back on their beginning years and they evaluate themselves against that, because, as you said, when you walk into the classroom the first day, the kids don't care if you've been there one day or 60 years. You're their teacher. The idea that at a college you're going to be an expert teacher is not on any principal's mind. In fact, good principals will work very hard with those first, second, and third year teachers. What's changed since the 1971s when we started is that when we walked in the classroom, there was no professional development. There was, here's the book, here's your class list, and don't call me. Remember that?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Shut the door and,
Yes.
and you were evaluated on how well you kept the door closed and didn't send anybody to the office.
That's right.
Also in education at that time, we were on more of a pyramid than we were today, or more of a rectangle. Schools weren't judged on how well they kept students in school. In fact, sometimes we were rated more highly for those that we eliminated. Kids disappeared quickly. You don't want to be here? Get out. Our society today has changed the goal of education 180 degrees from 1971 when we began. Now we're expected to bring all kids to the graduation line, and even now in the last 2 years, beyond. Now I'm responsible to have a happy family, to have a good job, and they're in the middle class. And that's okay, because we got big shoulders in education. But when you talk about pedagogy, I've seen in my career when I left, and I've said it before at the board table, better first-year teachers coming out of the colleges because they have the conversation ability, at least, to talk to me about learning styles, writing rubrics, differentiated teaching, projects, different kinds of assessments. We didn't talk about that. And we can't talk the talk of keeping everyone in school and graduating everyone and putting them on into a future that is bright and wonderful if we don't look at the students that they all have to stay. There's a greater demand today than ever for pedagogy, because in the 1960s when I went to school, and I think it was that way for about 100 years, Horace Mann made it up, I think, it was lecture, test, move on. We can't do that anymore. If someone's lecturing and testing, and they expect the kids to sit there quietly, get it, and take it away, that's not going to happen. We're not going to see those kids who are going to, or we're not going to be able to provide for those students who need to be college and career ready and beyond. You know, pedagogy begins the conversation as a first-year teacher that you learn in school. Okay, staff development that is provided by the district, because I don't want a first-year teacher telling me what staff development they want to have. No, I'm going to tell them what books. You read this book and you bring it back and we'll talk about it. We're going to meet regularly, you know, and with other teachers, and they're different stages of their career. They have different needs. But Ken, you're right. You know, a lot of people come out and they're not ready, because there's no way you're going to get that 22, 23-year-old to understand that they're going to move from being a student their whole life to transitioning out into the teacher. As I used to tell them, you're one of us now. You're one of them. You're not a kid. Homework isn't something you do to get the teacher off your back. Homework is something you do because that student's assessment needs to be ready for them, because the next day they're going to be either going to relearn it or they're going to move on to new stuff. You know, the game has changed. And too many people are still using the old rules and expecting new results. You know, what's being taught in schools today and universities to prepare students is better than ever. The conversations and transitions through professional development for new teachers is better than ever. But it doesn't mean everybody gets saved. They're still lemons. They're not like morning. Okay? You know, and what's one of the best things that ever happened? I'll just go. When a new teacher comes in and starts telling me how to run the school, where are you going? You know, you've been here 5 minutes. And we've all listened to that. There are those that just aren't fit. They've even learned the pedagogy. They know the talk. They've even learned the content, but they don't like the kids. You know, that's something we're leaving out of the formula. You know, so I guess to my board members, I would tell you, colleges are doing better and universities than ever before. Schools are doing better than ever before bringing people in. But teachers have accepted that new challenge that wasn't there in '71, that all students will succeed, not just those that persist. And the lecture is gone. So thank you for being leaders, and thank you for your conversation today. It's really motivating for me. Thank you.
Sally Cobble.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. As it's our responsibility as a board to accredit the schools of education in the schools of Kansas, I think it's very important for us to hear what is needed in the classroom to make successful teachers, because they are our number one. Without them, we can't be successful. They are our strength for the system. I think it's interesting that the research tells us that what makes a good teacher is their experience of getting out in the classroom. I'd like to commend K-State for your program on how often your students get out into the classroom. It goes along with what Mr. Willard is saying. Do we have the formula right on how much our students are in the classroom? And I think we've looked at a lot of different programs in which I'm a firm believer that the students need to, in those first years as a freshman or a sophomore, to get into those classrooms as an aide or something, so that before they even get into the school of education as a junior or sophomore, junior, whatever that institution feels comfortable with, that they get in there and they see and observe from a different angle than a student. Because I've known friends that have dropped out then. You know, you weed them out then. And then as they take their first methods class, you weed out some more. And so I would like to commend the schools of education that have those students in the classroom. And I think it would be interesting data to compile on principals, where they like to get their teachers from. Those first first-year teachers, where do those principals like to hire from? And I think that'll say a lot about the schools of education. And I think it's our challenge as a board to make sure we're accrediting schools of education that are doing it right. And so I think that was our purpose on bringing and talking about pedagogy. How much is right? I think the majority of us realize it's important, but how much do we need? And are we providing enough of that in today's world? Because the problems in the classroom are much more complex than when I taught. Just go back and to start thinking way back in the 70s, how many languages we didn't have in the classroom. And so as we evolve, how much ESL do we need? How much pedagogy do we need? How much? And those are the questions that I'm trying to answer myself. And I want to thank you very much.
Kathy Bush.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you guys for coming today. Really appreciate your time and your work, and your conversation was wonderful. I wanted to stand up and applaud after each one of you finished. And I look back and I too went, I was probably an alternative education student before there was such a program. I got my undergrad at K-State in biological sciences, and then I went back to Wichita, where I'm from, and they kind of put together a program for me so I could get my license. And the first time I was in the classroom was when I student taught, much like you were, Jeff. And I hadn't been in the classroom since I was in the classroom as a senior. And when I look at the program now, I do work at Wichita State part-time, and they have a PDS program there at the school, at the College of Education. And one of the big emphases of that PDS program, that stands for Professional Development Schools, is that those College of Education students are out in field placements for 4 semesters. So, and I look back at what I had and what these students are getting now, which kind of goes to what you talked about, Ken. There is no such thing as a traditional student anymore, but if there was, first semester of their junior year, they'd be out, and they're out for 3 hours a week, and then it increases to 6 hours, and then it goes up. So they've increased the what we call field placements significantly. And I do think that's having an impact, because I think they are better prepared. But it does go to pedagogy and content. I mean, both are important. They are absolutely important, because those secondary students, which I taught secondary science, and sometimes those secondary students have to take an extra semester to finish all their content. They have to get that extra semester, and I would guess some of them it's the same at K-State. They have that much more content they have to get. But the pedagogy that they get, the secondary folks, their first semester in the College of Ed, they have a general methods class. Then the second semester they have a methods class in their content area, plus a literacy class, so that we're now teaching the content area teachers how to teach literacy in their content area in secondary, which we never did. I didn't have any of that when I was going through. And then, the elementary folks, they're learning how to teach kids how to read and how to do math. So they have content and pedagogy both. So, I will never say content's not important, because it is. You've got to know what it is you're teaching, but you've also got to know how to teach it. And one of you said, I think Jeff, it was you said, how the teacher interacts with the student. And just how important that is. And yeah, you don't learn it all in the College of Education at all. But it does provide the foundation, and the thing that I think about is you learn how to learn, and you become that lifelong learner, like you're talking about reading all those books, and I wrote down a couple of those names that you guys talked about. So again, I appreciate what you do. If we want some students straight out of college to come and talk to us, I can get us some. So I'd be happy to do so, and I'm sure K-State has some too.
Absolutely. And again, I'll say all of you really are welcome to come to K-State anytime. You can come to my class. You can come to other classes. I think I speak for the dean when I say that you're welcome really anytime. And I'd love it if you came.
But thank you all. I'd like to come to your classes sometimes. Anytime. It'd be fun.
Anytime. We have one more question from Janet Waugh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm the one that asked for this because I was very interested in it. There's been a lot of discussion here and across the street on the value of pedagogy. You know, and I have 2 kids who are teachers, and I think they talk to me a lot. My son no longer is, but my daughter still is, about current in-service programs, professionals. You know, I think that's extremely valuable after you've been teaching for a while. But I am so pleased to hear that the universities, I think this is exciting, are sending these kids out early. Because I can remember when they went out the last semester of their senior year to student teach, and then some of them went out there and thought, I don't even like this. Right. You know, and here they had gone 3.5 years in the School of Education and they didn't like it.
Right.
I mean, so they went and frantically tried to get something else. So I'm thrilled to hear that. But I do think this pedagogy is extremely important, and I don't know, I'm not knowledgeable enough to know if what we have is right, if we need more, if we need less, if we need, because certainly content's number one. I think they've got to know their subject, sure. You know, but pedagogy is so important. But when you're thinking about this first-year teacher, you know, coming out, anybody as a first-year teacher, you can't tell me that anybody is great, you know, that first year. I mean, John is one of the best CPAs I know. And I bet you his first year in practice, he wasn't the best as good as he is today. Because I bet he's 100% better today. And so I think each of us in our professions, our first year, no matter what profession we're in, doctor, lawyer, whatever, police officer, Indian chief, whatever, we are not the best we can be the first year we do it. But even as a board member, we have to learn how to be board members. And so we go to professional development to learn how to be better board members, and I think that's important, but yet we had the basics coming in to do this. So thank you so much for your presentation. I think you've done a wonderful job, and I'm excited about what's happening in our schools, and you 3 are just outstanding representatives. Thank you so much.
Dina Horst.
Thank you. And I, too, would like to thank you for being here. It was inspiring. But it seems to me that pedagogy really gives, when you've been through that process, then you have not only the language, the common language to discuss with your colleagues, with your principal, board members, parents, whoever. But it also gives you the basis upon which to evaluate yourself. And you recognize what you need to do to be better, or you recognize it's not for you. And that gives you a basis that I think I'm concerned that individuals who have not been through that process may not realize that they're not doing as good of a job as they need to be. So, thank you again.
The clock on the wall says 20 till. It's time to reconvene.
So that's what they wanted to talk about, was funding.
Scott Gordon is here. We'll turn it over to Scott to lead our discussion on emergency safety intervention. Appeals recommendation.
And if I may, before we actually start, if I may take the opportunity, I want to introduce you to our new Assistant General Counsel. Kelly Browers comes to us from J.P. Morgan. Before she was with J.P. Morgan, and I already threatened I was going to mess up the name of the law firm, Manson, Carbonic, and Burke. And before that, she actually clerked for Supreme Court Justice Dan Biles. And she's been with us for 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
Thereabouts.
She's already attended 2 out-of-state conferences with us. She's gung-ho on the Professional Practices Commission, so I'm officially turning those responsibilities over to her. And I will certainly miss that a little bit. But anyway, we're all very excited that Kelly was able to join us.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
So, thanks. All right. On the Emergency Safety Intervention Administrative Review, I understand that this was presented to you last month. I apologize. I already had plans for being in Colorado before I realized this was going to come to you. That was the first time that you had received it. We left this as a discussion item this month because we figured you needed and wanted more time. We certainly didn't want this to be too quick of a decision one way or the other. So I thought that I would take this time to kind of give my explanation as to what the regulation calls for and what it means and how it actually operates. There are a couple of modifications, very small modifications, between last month's draft and what is in your packet now. I'll explain those later as we get to them. They're really not that significant, but that was based on the feedback and comments we had received during last month's meeting. Kind of wanted to start off with just explaining how an administrative review would work its way from the use of seclusion or restraint all the way through the end point, if you will, of an administrative review. Because when you look at it in regulation form, I will tell you that you don't write regulations for parents, and you don't write regulations for students. Regulations are written to put schools on notice and to put the agency on notice as to what the minimum requirements are going to be. So, to kind of explain the process, if there is seclusion or restraint that is used on a particular child, we'll say Timmy, is subject to restraint. Well, the school already, by law, is required to document it, notify the parents, and they are only to use restraint in very limited circumstances. A parent finds out that restraint was used on their child. Perhaps the parent does not approve of or does not like the fact that restraint was used on their child, so they have a remedy of taking that issue to the local board. That's already in the regulation. That's in 9142.2. The local board actually reviews the actions of the school. They make a determination either that use of restraint was appropriate, or that restraint violates our policies, or we need to review our policies so that we can avoid situations like this happening in the future if it's something that needs to be avoided. So it starts with the local school board resolving the issue. That information in a written form is provided to the parent so that they understand, okay, we did an investigation. This is what we determined has occurred. If the parent or the eligible student, which is basically someone who's 18 years old or older, if they still don't feel that they've been heard, they don't feel that the local board has resolved it correctly, then they get to ask for an administrative review by the state board. The way the regulation is set up now, or the proposed, is instead of it having a full-blown evidentiary hearing in front of you during a board meeting, you would designate a hearing officer. That's not that uncommon. There's 3 other areas where you've already designated KSDE staff to be hearing officers. They kind of do the work for you, if you will. The hearing officer receives some documentation from the parent or eligible student. That was one of the first changes we made. There was a question as to, well, why does it have to be typed? Okay, so we've changed it. It either has to be legibly written, or typed. As long as we can read it, it's acceptable. They send the documentation, which is to say if there's any letters they've received from the school, if there's letters they've sent to the school, whatever written findings were provided to them by the local board as a result of the local conflict resolution, they would provide all that information to the hearing officer. That's a starting point. The hearing officer may or may not need more information. This draft of the regulation gives the hearing officer the discretion to gain more information, whether it's sending staff out to the school to investigate what's going on, whether it's talking to the school officials, whatever it takes. They would have the ability to do that. Then the hearing officer, within 60 days, would release to you, as well as to the parents or the eligible student and the school district, look, we've reviewed what happened in this instance. We think not me, but we believe that in this circumstance, the use of that restraint was appropriate, and you resolved it correctly. You did everything you're supposed to do by regulation. That's one possible outcome. The other possible outcome may be, we've reviewed everything that happened, and as much information that was provided to us, we don't believe you actually are in compliance with the regulation. Your actions and your policy don't comply with the regulation. So we suggest you take these steps. This is what we want you to do. And we're going to inform the state board that that's what we've told you need to do. Or rather, we've suggested that you do. And the third option is, and this may actually happen, there may be additional information that comes forward from the parent that was never shared with or was unavailable to the school district, the local board when they were making their decision. Which is possible, because the local board only has 30 days to do their own investigation and come up with their own conclusions. So there may be additional information that comes to light. There may be a medical diagnosis that no one knew about. There may be information about that particular child that they find out about from other parents or from other students that was not available at that time. Well, if the information was not made available to every party during the original proceeding, you send it back to the local school and say, look, we found out this information. We think this is probably something you should know, and you have another crack at it. Maybe this changes your mind as to how this situation should have been handled now that you know this additional information. So they send it back to the local school for them to make additional findings. They may say the same exact thing. The local school board may say, well, even with that initial information, that doesn't change our mind. And again, that's information that would be shared with the state board at your next regularly scheduled meeting. If you are going to adopt an appeal procedure, it's the opinion of staff, that's what your appeal should look like. It gives deference to the local school district or the local school board to solve their own matters, to keep it in-house. But it does give the parents or eligible students a voice to be heard by an independent body. So it accomplishes both of the goals that I heard that this state board was looking for. And I believe that this draft or this suggested review, if you're going to adopt one, complies with the limits, if you will, or is in compliance with what is expected under the Constitution. What questions can I answer for you? And I'm more than happy to go through every single part of the regulation. I will tell you there were a couple of citation errors that have been since corrected. But this is a receive item. No decisions are expected to be made today. But I'm more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Dina Horst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do we have any specific directives as to what should be in a district's policy?
Yes.
Or are we just simply saying you have a policy and you don't have a policy? Are those already in one of the regs, or, and if so, which one is it?
If I understand your question correctly, 9142.4 outlines what the bare minimum a school policy should be. It establishes what the minimum standard is for every school district in the state of Kansas. It says your policy will prohibit A, B, C, D, and it goes through it that way.
does that effectively cover the concerns that we've heard of some parents?
I think it covers all of the concerns that could possibly be covered by regulation or statute. I don't know what else. I mean, I've seen the other drafts of what other people have come up with. They are not as specific as the draft that we've proposed to you as to what the schools can and cannot do. And they're certainly not as specific as to what a hearing officer would look at on an appeal. Yes, do I think that it would, in a perfect world, that should resolve the problems or the concerns that have been raised?
Okay.
And I have received communications that say that the regulations that we passed are weaker than the federal regulations, and I thought ours were based on the federal regulations. I just wanted you to clarify that again.
That I'm going to have to defer and let you want to answer it. Jana will answer that one. I believe you're accurate, but she did that work.
Yes, hello. There are no federal regulations on the use of seclusion and restraint as it applies to schools. However, there is guidance put out by the U.S. Department of Education that speaks to and really formed the basis to what the Kansas regulations were based on. And that was guidance prepared across the whole Department of Education with input from other folks as well.
Well, that's what I am glad to hear you say, because that was my understanding, and I just did not, couldn't understand that criticism. Another one was that what we approved recently, 6 months, I don't know how long ago it was, the regulations we approved were also weaker than the guidelines that we approved in 2007, and weren't as strong as the guidelines. And I didn't understand that either. All of these issues are very confusing, because I thought I knew where we were because I'd been there and every step of the way, and then received these comments by letter or other means, and it's very confusing. But is that, in fact, do you think that is a adequate, valid criticism that the 2007 guidelines were in fact better or more stringent or whatever than what we recently passed?
Regulations are always going to be the stronger than the guidelines. And,
I know that.
And then the regulations themselves spell out exact prohibitions on some of the most, what are known to be some of the most harmful or even sometimes deadly forms of restraint, such as a prohibition on prone and supine, prohibition on any restraint that may restrict breathing, and those sort of pieces putting in place. And further, the regulations require that there is a district policy developed that is in accordance with the regulations and has to contain certain components. And moreover, too, and I believe in going back to what maybe was the impetus, too, for initially going forth to adopt regulations is the assurance that parents are notified within 2 school days of the use of seclusion or restraint with their child. And so all of those are strengthened protections that are may have been suggested in some forms within those guidelines, but now are regulation and required to be done by every district across Kansas.
Okay, thank you. Ken Willard has a question.
Madam Chair, I think you alluded to the fact that there just seems to be a lot of confusion about this, and I agree with that. And it seems to me that that's because we're trying to affect something that's more or less concrete out of regulations rather than just having a uniform policy that Kansas schools would comply with. We've asked and actually basically ordered every school to have ESI policy in their school. And they are to comply with our regulations, or, 9142.4. But that's as far as it's gone. We don't know if that is in fact taking place or not. We would have no way of knowing until a complaint came to us and we were to investigate that one situation. And we have 286 districts or whatever it is. So what we have is so loose that I don't think we can affect anything, any more strength in it by just tweaking the regulations. I think I could feel a lot better about it and feel like we were getting someplace and actually developing a rational, effective appeals process if we were to write our own uniform policy. We could use the regs and just use that wording and just make that uniform ESI policy for the state that all schools will comply with. So there's one policy, not 286 or 286 variations on our regulations, which is what we have now.
Scott, do you want to comment on that? Does anyone? I'm sorry, did I put you on the spot?
Well, whatever the board decides, that's what we're going to do. We serve at the pleasure of the board. I understand that there are some that want to have a uniform standard. And that was kind of the point that I was trying to make is you have a uniform standard. I don't know, you can direct us and we'll write it, but we tried making this as uniform as possible. If you come up with a uniform standard, I think you're still going to have the same issue of you're not going to know if the schools are complying with your uniform standard until someone raises the issue. We could do that. I think you have, in all honesty, rereading back through 9142.2, I believe that sets the bare minimum standard that every school in the state of Kansas must comply with. I think it accomplishes the goals that you're looking for. As someone that reads and writes these laws, I think that's what that does. But again, whatever the board wants to decide or ask us to do, you asked us to bring you a draft of an appeal. You tell us how you want it tweaked.
Well, I'm not complaining about what you've done. I think you've tried to do exactly what we ask you to do. But it seems to me that no amount of tweaking it is going to actually accomplish what we wanted, and we were pretty clear that we wanted a simple process whereby a parent could appeal a decision by a local school board and have another opinion about that. But it seems to me that with the regulations, we're pretty much constrained to determining whether or not the school did things in a proper order and followed the policy they've written, although we don't know what it is until that time. And then it leaves this. I mean, the last piece of the regulation that we got, if I could find it here, and I can't seem to find it right now, was that if the local board fails to initiate corrective action within the time allowed by the hearing officer shall inform the state board during its next scheduled board meeting. And it leaves it there. So I can't see any possibility of ever bringing something like this to a conclusion. But if we had a uniform policy, and I'm not saying this is happening, I hope it isn't happening, but if we had a school the reason we did this in the first place is because we were continuing to hear serious allegations about kids who had been, about violations of ESI regulations and misuse of seclusion and restraint. And so we decided that we need to go farther with that. And now we've been trying to tweak these regulations to make that happen, and it just doesn't seem to me that it's going to happen. But if we had our own uniform policy that every school district were to comply with, we would have, and hopefully never have to use it, but we would have some ability to move that district in the right direction by saying that accreditation would be qualified until this corrective action is taken or something like that. Not making a decision necessarily about that particular student's case, but about the actions of the school and the decision of the school board. So I just think we would be in a better position if we had a uniform policy. That's just my recommendation, and it may not be worth anything, but that's I think I would like to consider that, because I don't see getting to a satisfactory position just trying to tweak the regulations.
Kathy Bush.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I'm still a little bit unclear just of the constitutionality of us being able to impose these procedures, so to speak. I mean, is it constitutional? I mean, there's been questions. I've heard questions from different people and gotten feedback from various groups, I'm sure, as everybody has. Is this under the constitutional domain of, I know, we have the supervisory category. So does this fit under the supervisory category? Is that where we're looking at as far as constitutionality? I don't know whether that's a question for you or Mark or who that's a question for. And so that's kind of my first question, is where are we sitting with this as far as, and I guess the constitutionality we would never know in case it ever went to court, but, you know, as far as opinions at this point in time, where we're sitting right now, are we at a place where this fits within constitutionality of our supervisory capacities?
You want to start, or you want me to?
Well, we can probably tag team a little bit, because I think there's this question probably should be split into two areas. You've got, I mean, the area of constitutionality that we've addressed, that I've specifically provided you an opinion on, has to do with the appeals process, whether or not the board has the ability to overrule a local school board's decision or outcome. I think there's a slight merger of the discussion between the board's authority to conduct an appeal and the board's ability to set some uniform standards or regulations or policy. And then we also using the policy in two different ways. You're using the word policy as it relates to the local school board's policy to implement the regulations, and then setting a state policy in terms of what the regulations are. That seems to be where the confusion to me, where I'm hearing the discussion. So there's two separate issues, and maybe I'd kick it back to you, because I'm not going to divulge the opinion that I've given the board in terms of the appeals process in the public setting, and I've shared with you my opinion about that. But as it relates to the regulation and whether this board can set standards related to this, you all have analyzed that more closely as to whether or not this board has the authority to set standards in a uniform fashion for school districts, which you've done in other contexts.
I would say that I've advised the department that this is the extent to which you constitutionally can have any level of appeal. Do I believe that this draft of the appellate procedure or administrative review fits within your constitutional authority as a state board? Yes. That's why we wrote it that way.
Okay.
Do you have the authority to establish minimum standards or, general standards by regulation? Yes, you do. The question is, to what extent can you enforce them? Mm-hmm. Or if you want to enforce them, that's another issue that's open for discussion.
Okay. Okay, then my next one has to do kind of when we were defining emergency safety intervention, which is not something we really looked at today. But I think in the regs, we called it as being immediate danger of causing of serious physical harm. Is that correct?
The definition means the use of seclusion or physical restraint when a student presents an immediate danger to self or others. Violent action that is destructive of property may necessitate the use of emergency safety intervention.
So is there any reason we didn't use the Department of Ed definition of that? And I don't know if this is a question for Jana or who it's a question for.
I can tell you why. Yeah, I can
Okay.
tell you why.
Okay.
What's the definition of bodily harm? It's severe bodily harm? Serious bodily harm?
Yeah.
Explain to me what serious bodily harm is versus bodily harm. And I will tell you that there are books of litigation on that issue.
Okay. So that descriptor was
It
hard to define.
it limits what school personnel, because now the fear is, okay, I have a student that is in the middle of a fight, for example, or is trying to fight me. The student is punching me. Now, punching me is bodily harm, but severe bodily harm may require a broken nose, may require lots of bruising. So do you want to tie the hands of a teacher or administrator to where they're not allowed to intervene unless they think their nose is going to be broken versus being punched in the chest?
Having broken up a few of those fights, I understand.
That's, in all candor, that's why I believe we did not put that modifier in. And Janet, you can correct me if I'm wrong. That's why we avoided that modifier. I don't know that it opens the door for that much more use of ESI, but that's why we didn't use that term.
Okay, and then my next question, as far as the appeal process as it's currently written, and if there is additional information that the parent provides, and then it is sent back to the local board to review that appeal, correct? Which I personally don't have a problem with. However, in there, is there a statement, or does there need to be a statement that the parent can then appeal that decision? Because that, to me, wasn't clear that that then could be appealed. That second decision based on additional information could be appealed. I didn't see that in there.
My thought is that you'd want to leave that at the discretion of the hearing officer to decide if they want to leave, if they want to carry that case and leave it open in front of them, or if they want to send it back and indicate in their findings the parent still has the right to further appeal whatever the local decision is at that point. You're right, it's not stated in the regulation that that can be ordered. We can put it in there.
I just think there needs to be some clarity with that. And just make sure that that, I guess, second local hearing, it might be a second local hearing, I don't know how you describe it, but that could then be brought back to the hearing officer. I assume it'd be the same hearing officer, so obviously they'd be familiar with the case. But I just think some kind of a statement in there might be a little clearer on that.
Okay.
Thank you. I may have another question later, but that's it for now.
Scott, I think going back to your response to her first question about the clarification between the appeals process and the uniform standard, I think you addressed that. Isn't the elephant in the room the issue about whether or not, as a matter of public policy, this board could go stronger with the language and using the issue, for example, the example that you just used, serious bodily harm? This board could go with stronger language, but it was based on the give and take and the recommendations of the staff and looking at that issue, that was language that was selected. So trying to correct it with a stronger, in some people's mind, maybe correct it with a stronger appeals process isn't really the solution. Going back to my point that there's two separate issues. There's the language of the regulations, which some people may or may not be satisfied with, and then there's the appeal process.
Right, they are two different issues. To change, if you wanted to change that language between bodily harm or severe bodily harm, that would open up what's already been approved and was adopted in 2012.
13.
13. And if I recall, that was actually part of the discussion when it was originally passed, as to what term was actually going to be used. So that debate has happened. It could happen again. I'm only here giving you the appeal process. But sure, yeah, there are two different things. It's not something we can try to amend with Section 4 of this regulation.
Janet Waugh.
I'll pass.
Ken Willard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciated Mark's trying to clear up some of the confusion I probably caused in my comments, because in using the term regulations or policy or standards, what I intended was that is a uniform standard. We write standards for everything from history and science and music to dance and physical education, so we could certainly write standards for the use of seclusion and restraint that we want to stand by. But I think the real problem that I see in what we're trying to do with the regulations is that there is no value in spending any more time on an appeals process that doesn't have some conclusion at some point, or some possibility of exacting a remedy. And you can't do that with anything that we see here. However, if we had uniform standards that we adopted and everybody was aware of, we would have some ability to effect some remedy in a case where it was necessary. So again, I don't know I hope I'm making myself clear. I don't know that I am, but I just think we're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole by tweaking this appeals process into this regulation, when if you get it in there, it still doesn't do anything. It can come to us for a review, and it goes back to the board, and it stops. Or then it comes back to us with what they did, and it stops. There's no way to actually get to a resolution of the problem that's to our satisfaction. So that's it. Thank you.
Jim McNeese.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for the appeal process that you've put in here. It's starting, some are frustrated with it. It's starting, though, to take a shape and form that is along the lines at least I spoke about 2 months ago, I believe. But there is a concern that I have, a little bit beyond the appeal process, to the person who's appealing. We're pretty used to, as school professionals, dealing with bureaucracies and hierarchies and organization and bureaucracies. Many times, and the parents who will be appealing, in the majority of these cases, are typically frustrated because when they come to us, they're upset. There's some emotional side to this that we haven't talked about that they bring, and they're not really very good at this. It's kind of, it really is kind of, as one of our speakers said this morning, kind of an unfair playing field. We're good at this. This is what I do. I've been through lots of appeals. This might be your first. And I had mentioned earlier, that we need to almost be the advocate for them in an appeals process. Now that sounds kind of weird. We're going to help them, kind of, I don't want to use the word sue, but help them appeal to us. And the answer is yes. That is an ethical issue of support for kids. If a parent has an issue, I'm going to help them, through the process. I'm going to. I would like to think all our folks would approach it from the same direction. So I guess where the bottom line is that we need to be kind of an advocate for those who appeal. Are we doing it incorrectly? Didn't I do this right? What's happening? And to just dismiss it on a technicality, would be wrong. But when we have to gather all this paper and put it all together, you go home to and I have special ed kids in our extended family, and some of them aren't really good paper keepers. and my training has been to give them all the paper they need, to provide them, because I got copies of it. Let's not play cat and mouse here. Let's be on the same team. We're trying to do the best for kids. And in an appeal process, if it comes out, Ken, that as a school or as a administrator or teacher or board, if it comes back from the State Department of Education that I didn't do this right, that carries a big burden. It's not just, okay, so what? What are they going to do to me? Because the next step is litigation. And if the State Department has said you didn't do this right, and they take it to court, you have a bigger hammer. So you better fix it. Now, we can't go back and fix the bruises, maybe. I don't know about the case this morning. I'd like to hear the other side, because there's always another side. But we need to be on the side of the student, as a board, and we need to be on the side of the district, and the professionals, because they have a story to tell. But my point here is to get more focused, is that parents sometimes need an assistance, and we can block them because we know the rules. They don't even know the rules. So giving them the rules, helping them organize their materials, helping them in this process, instead of being adversarial, we should almost be advocates for them. And the system shouldn't be about who's winning or who's right. It's what's right. What's right for the student. And if a kid's got bruises on him, something happened. On the other hand, it doesn't mean something bad happened and we were terrible people. We followed the policy. We got our training. What happened? We shouldn't be afraid of this. This should be something that really works for us. And the transparency we need in it and the advocacy we need in it should be part of that policy. Thank you.
Sally Cobble.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ken, I was trying to follow what you were saying, and are you talking about consequences, that we don't have anything in there about consequences or solutions? I'm sorry, I just didn't. Can you?
Yes.
Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'm confused as well, and at this point, I hardly know what to direct, what to ask for. I came on this board in 2007. We spent months discussing and reviewing and finally established guidelines to protect our special ed students and be sure they were safe. Then this year, or was it at the end of last year, I don't know, this issue came back and we thoughtfully went through months of discussion and review and approval to come to the point where we have regulations in place. That's better than guidelines. It has more authority, more teeth, I guess. Anyway, so we went through that whole process to protect all students, not just special ed students, so that we could be assured that there were certain, and I thought they were standards. Maybe they're not standards, but now I hear about standards and I hear about changing policy, and I thought we had one because we had regulations. So is anyone else as confused as I am? I mean, at this point, I do not know what to ask of you. Does anyone else have because this talk about standards, I thought regulations more or less outline the standards for what were expected. Do they not? So, Mark, okay, Ken, I'll give you one more shot at it.
Well, you asked a question, and I was just going to try to give you an answer for what it's worth, and maybe answer it with a question. In what way are our current regulations stronger or affecting better results than the guidelines that we had before?
I'm not an expert on the difference between guidelines and regulations, but I thought a guideline was merely a suggestion and a regulation was a requirement. Now, maybe that is not true, and I need help here because I'm not an expert in this area. I'm just trying to, in my own mind, figure this out because I did think when we passed regulations and went through months of discussion and review, and we had to go through a process to get those regulations approved, that we thought we were improving the situation for all students and doing a good thing. And now, here we are, back to this back to the beginning again, it seems to me, and I still don't understand why what we did in passing regulations was not a better thing, Ken, than just having guidelines.
Well, Madam
And
Chair.
if the difference between regulations and standards, I thought these regulations set a minimum standard for what we expected. And like I said, I'm not an expert. I'm just very frustrated because we have spent countless thoughtful hours in trying to do what we think is possible to protect the safety of our children. Mark.
Madam Chair, I would just say that I think you accurately described the difference between guidelines, and I saw Scott nodding in agreement as well. Guidelines are suggestions. The regulations are minimum standards. It's something that's enforceable in terms of what's the minimum that's required. And I think that the point I guess I was trying to make with my earlier distinction between the appeal process and whether you call them standards or regulations or requirements, as it's before the board right now, that's water under the bridge in terms of the language of those regulations. What I believe is in front of the board now is the scope and the language of the appeals process. That, as Scott said earlier, that doesn't mean you can't revisit the language if there are board members that are unsatisfied with the language. You can always continue to do that, take that on in any way you want. But right now, I believe where you are in the process is you asked for an appeal process. It's come before you on a couple of occasions, and it's been tweaked based on feedback that you've given to the staff. And the issue for the board is what is the appropriate scope of the appeal process that you asked for them. And then I think that's going to next be for approval.
So I'm hearing from Ken that you want, can you articulate again what it is that you feel is necessary? A final say-so by the board? What is it that you're feeling we're lacking?
Well, Madam Chair, if we have an appeals process that doesn't have an end and can't result in an outcome different from what happened before the appeal, then there's no reason for an appeals process.
But why do you think it wouldn't result in something that was different than what was
Well, even if
appealed?
it did, we couldn't change anything.
Can you respond to that?
Because we don't have control over the local schools. We can't require them to do anything under the regs. They write their own standards based on the guidelines that are based on the regs that we put out there, and we don't approve those standards. And the regulations, even with the tweaks, identifies the things that parents can appeal.
But you said we don't approve the standards. We already have. We've approved regulations. Those are the standards.
And the requirement is that every local school have ESI standards.
That
a board policy.
Or policy.
Implement those
They have a
standards.
policy, okay, based upon the regulations that we have out there. But we have trust without verifying.
Well, then maybe there should be a process where districts are surveyed to see what their policy is. I don't have an answer. Is that an issue you could discuss and bring back to us? Because we are at a point of stalemate here, I think.
Sure, absolutely. And we currently, I think it was a couple meetings back, spoke about what we were doing with the data. You know, something required by the regulations is the submission of data by all the districts. And under guidelines, that was suggestions, and we did get data on there, but it wasn't a requirement. And now we're getting data submitted by every school in Kansas. And that is a great first step to try to figure out and see the landscape of the use of seclusion and restraint across Kansas. And then we're providing technical assistance to those folks who are 2 standard deviations above the median. And we're going out there and working with those schools, sending on-site TA providers to see what is happening. Is there a misunderstanding about what the definitions are, or really is there an issue about the use of seclusion and restraint in those schools? But it's a review of the policies, it's technical assistance, and that's how we are beginning that process to really hone in and take a look. And we're also providing technical assistance to those folks who just reported zeros, because we want to make sure that that too is there. So that's where we are right now, but we'll be happy to update on that.
But Jana, we're talking about policy here, and Ken's question is, how can we be assured that their policy is in line with the regulations that we did approve? Now, is there a way of having them respond in some manner through, I don't know how you gather your information, but I think that's the hang-up right now, that Ken feels, and maybe other board members do, that we don't really know what's happening. I thought their local policies had to be based upon and reflect the regulations that we approved. Now, is that correct or not?
That is correct.
Okay, the crux of the problem is then that we don't know that they've done that, I guess.
Correct. And I would say that most school districts across Kansas are members of the Kansas Association of School Boards, who drafted a sample policy that does meet the requirements and the regulations. And when we do provide that technical assistance and or we get calls, Laura and I do check online to look at that school's policy, that district's policy, to ensure that it does comply with the regulations.
Okay, so I think what we need to know is how many school districts are using the KASB recommendation? The ones that aren't, have you looked at? I mean, we need some more information, and we could discuss this for another hour. We don't have time. I believe we'll leave it there and see if you can bring that type of information back to us so we have an idea what the current situation is with local policy. Is that possible?
We'll do our best to pull together as much of that information as we can.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry, all of you people who have your names on the list, but we do have a lot of other business to attend to today, so we will move forward. We are ready to hear from Dale Dennis.
Are you ready? Okay, we have some things we want to share with you. And first, Craig's going to give you out. This is the general election results. We thought you'd like to have that. There's only been one change that I know of due to provisional ballots, and that's in Cowley County. And Mr. Trimmer, I believe, was a winner there. That vote was very close, but we'll let you have that. Next, Craig, let's go to, I want to give you, this is the most important part about what I'm going to talk about. State general fund receipts, we've had lots of calls, lots of concerns, and we want to comment about that if we could, please. When you get the memo that Craig's passing out, if you'll please go to page 2, second page. near the end, there's a table that puts this all together.
Which one are we looking at, Dale?
This page too, right?
This one here?
That election results just for you to look at when there's nothing else to do at home, when you're watching TV. That's the next one. Okay, page 2, table 1. Are we all together?
Yep.
All right. This is the consensus revenue estimates. It shows the actual amount for last year, the revised amount for 15, and the consensus estimate for 16 and 17. Probably the simplest, easiest way to take a look at this is go down about a half a dozen lines to the bottom where it says total taxes. It tells you the tax revenue, the state general fund, which is the big guru in financing state government across the board. And you'll notice there the increase or decrease in taxes. Follow that across, like in fiscal year 15, they believe it'll be up 3.5. Next year, 2.4, and 17, 2.4. Now, we're a little out of balance. Our expenditures are greater than our revenue, and we're going to look at that here in just a minute. Just have a little faith. Turn to Table 2. Table 2 compares the estimate for this current year with the original consensus estimate. And as you'll notice, in the third column over, in the last line, they reduced that estimate about $205 million. Is that fair? We all together? Okay. Now, I believe that this next page kind of puts it all together. And this is the recommendations that we receive from the general fund profile. See, what happens is the budget division will give us their recommendations, and then we'll appeal it. And we always go back to what you originally adopted. So we'll appeal it back to what you adopted. But I think it's important to note in column 15, see the $6.3 billion there in that second column, about the fifth line down. They're recommending that the state general fund expenditures be shifted from 14 was 21.4 million. That's just a fact. Human cases.
Tell me where you are again. I'm sorry.
On the last page, on the second column. This is really the peanut, Ken.
Okay,
I think.
got it.
Estimated expenditures?
Yes. We got the revenue. Now notice, the revenue is up the top.
Yeah.
And you can see the revenue is less than it was last year in 14. Now, the estimated expenditures is $6,300,000,000. But 21.4 of those expenditures were shifted from 14 to 15, last year to this year. 46.2 million is the increase above appropriations for human services caseload, social services. 53.1 is school finance adjustments. Now, Craig, let's just give them that. Got it? We'll just stop here for a minute. We'll give that to you. And I think it's important that you see a breakdown of what that is. That 53.1 million. And they're recommending that that be funded, but this is what it cost. Now, the 53.1, Craig, where's it at? I need one. Okay. General state aid. Everybody see that on a sheet we passed out? I'm going to bring it back to the 53.1 million. Okay. $945,000 is money in the general state aid that we will not spend. That's the estimate. And there's a big consensus estimating group that puts this together. Supplemental general state aid is up $43 million. Now, what that amounts to is that correct? 34, isn't it? She typed that wrong. Anyway, supplemental general fund, what caused that to jump above the original estimates was the 81st percentile. Remember, you go up to the 81st percentile, you equalize it to the 81st percentile. And that number, change that please. See at 43,278 should be 34,278. Yeah, gotcha. 34,278. Now, you equalize it to the 81st percentile. The 81st percentile is computed in May. That increased 6.8%. So that 34 million is primarily due to the increase in the 81st percentile. And it's all tied to the assessed valuation per pupil. You sort the assessed valuation per pupil low to high, you go to the 81st percentile. And if you have, in that group, if you have declining enrollment, increase in valuation, little oil valuation, whatever, why, that went up about 6.8%, from 109 million plus to 116 million plus. Capital outlay state aid, nobody knew that till boards made decisions. Capital outlay state aid, this is come from the court case hit and the LOB together, was 19,799,000. You add up those three with a correction on the 34 instead of 43, is $53.132 million. That coincides right here with our chart, 53.1. And so that we won't be appealing those because they put it in. That's been included so far. Can it change in the future? Somebody might change it. Then Capers is 5,578,000, and you'll see that they rounded out 5.6 million, right under the 53.1. So any of these items that we just described, we will not be appealing to the Division of Budget because they funded them. You can also see in out years, human services caseloads, that's important. And then you're going to say school finance in 16 dropped a little bit. And you say, General, why that happened? One of the reasons is valuation goes up and 20 mills produces more money. So that relieves some of that burden. And there's a lot of things goes into that, but and nobody knows what the 81st percentile will be. We always estimate it based on the prior year. Capers and schools goes up. Now that 52.4 million increase, don't that sound like a lot? But the contribution rate goes up. Remember, this individual puts in so much and the state balances out. To try to get that done, that goes up 1.1%. Well, 1.1% on all salaries covered by Capers is significant. And that's primarily, I think there's an increase in salaries of, I don't know, real small increase in salaries, very small. But most of this is due to that rate increase of 1.1 percentage point. And you can see then Capers, same thing the following year. Bottom line in general state aid, supplemental general state aid, capital outlay, Capers, it's been funded at this point. That's the budget director recommends. So anything that's funded, we will not be appealing except those items in which the board asks for additional amount. And we'll call that to their attention. But the current law in those areas, we believe, and they believe it to be funded based on consensus estimates. It's a little bit now. Let me go to the next step. You've heard about a shortfall notice right under the line where the expenditures were in fiscal year 15, see the 278.7? There's been a lot of press coverage on the shortfall this year. That's a 278.7, and that's where it is. That's what it takes to get us to zero. And the next year, you've heard about 436 million shortfall. That is showing in under column 16.
Dale?
Yeah.
Is that 436 cumulative, or is that an additional 436 shortfall?
If you got this 278, it'd be cumulative. In other words, if you funded 278, it would drop to 436.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd go down, right, John?
Well, you'd have a carryover then.
You'd have carryover.
Yeah.
That's right, and that would drop it.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
That's correct. Good question, though. Is there any questions on that? I thought this sheet, you can go through all these details, but this sheet kind of summarizes and puts it kind of in perspective. But for this year, we will not be appealing general state aid, LOB state aid, capital outlay state aid. We're talking about lots of money, but it may be twinked here, there, and yonder, but the intent is that they be funded. And that came in the budget division, so they will not be included in our appeal for that purpose. I'd encourage you to, when you got time and so forth, to take a look at the table 1 and 2, and the reason for that, to get comparisons as to what's happening. Table 1 particularly, where we are and where the money's coming in from and what the shortfall happens to be or not be. But I think on table 2, third page, why it shows you how far the estimate for 15 originally was $2 million in individual income tax. Table 2, third page, about the fourth line down, $2,519,000, and the estimate now is $2,280,000. So most of that is where the estimate was off was in individual income tax. This is takes time kind of to let it soak in, but we were quite pleased that, and it could change, but we were quite pleased that the intent was to fund this year. And the other thing we want to give you, and just for information, is the K-12 Student Performance Efficiency Committee's meeting later this week, and we'll pass out the agenda. It's mostly presentations. I don't think they're going to do any voting on recommendations till the next meeting. Madam Chair, we'd be glad to try to answer any questions. We apologize for the typo on the 43 rather than 34. We should have caught that. We just did that a little while ago.
Questions for Dale?
Words of wisdom.
Don't look this way.
Oh, Dina had words of wisdom. All right. We could use the words of wisdom. Dina, go right ahead.
Dina Horst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Going to the back page of your stapled piece, when you get in the out years, 2016 and 2017, with school finance adjustments, they've obviously reduced the amount. Are there projections that have come from the department, or are they just using that as?
No, it's a combination of the research department, the budget division, and us. And let me tell you why that is. That $9 million is primarily due to growth and valuation because the base stays the same. So you'll pick up a little bit there because it's about $30 billion, 20 mills. You pick up a little valuation while you pick up a few coins. That $34 million, you may remember last year during the discussion that they decided to disperse the severance tax money, and we get about $26 or $7 million of that severance tax money, which relieves the general fund. It's a one-time deal.
Now it's gone.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the reason for the $34 million there. You can take about $7, $8 million of that is due to growth and valuation, and the remainder of that is due to the money we get in the severance tax. One time. Yep. And they chose fiscal year 17, remember, to do that. Madam Chair, any words of wisdom, advice, counsel? That's kind of where we are, and our appeal for the current year will be not lengthy. We appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, were we going to do possible legislative?
Oh, yeah. Dale,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm washing paperwork here.
All right.
Policy recommendations for 2015. Kathy, did you have?
We'll take
something
anything
to
the board
suggest?
agrees to.
Yeah, I just have had a few questions to me, and it has to do with hiring or employing retired educators. Evidently, that law is up. I don't know if it's the end of this year.
Yeah. That law on hiring retirees and paying the surcharge
Right.
expires at the end of this year. That's correct.
Okay. And the question that I had, and I think even KASB is going to put this in their legislative agenda, of course they have to vote on it yet, but is to extend that law, but then ask for an exemption for hiring for special education committees from that CAPER surcharge. Personally, I think that's a pretty good thing to ask for. I just know how many, certainly my districts could benefit from that.
There's over 2,500 people employed by school districts that are retirees. I thought you might ask that, so I checked that out this morning. And anyway, and it's up for renewal, and the legislature can do that, and it would be a great for school people. The surcharge on that's about 22%. So if you pay somebody $50,000, then you got 22% of it the district must pay to the retirement system to help fund the retirement system and keep it actuarially sound. And we got a ways to go there. What many school districts will do, they'll take the surcharge out of the salary, and legally they can do that. So if you're going to pay them $50,000, and let's say the surcharge is 11, make it rounded off, then they'll get paid 39. So indirectly, the employee will think they're paying it, but the law says that the salary can be set by the board, but they have to pay 22% surcharge.
So is there any talk about possibly, because it sounds like maybe KASB is going to request that they accept special ed.
Yes, they're already talking about it. There's a meeting coming up here sometime, I think, in the near future that they're going to discuss that as to what to do. One of the challenges in this arena, I'd love it if we get out of the surcharge business. But the other hand is CAPERS is about $8 or $9 billion and with me, a lack of being actuarially sound. So that'll be the challenge. Legislators was told when they started is, you set the surcharge and let us local board members decide whether they want to hire them or not. I mean, that's just flat fact. They come in, the superintendent said, that's our business to decide who and when we hire, and if you set the surcharge so that you don't lose money, and we'll decide whether we want to hire them or somebody else. But there's a significant number in special ed because of the shortage.
Right.
And if they don't extend this on special ed, we got a nightmare.
Yeah.
You drop out several hundred special ed teachers, and they're not available.
Well, I've even heard that the secondary math and science, the numbers of those folks who are retirement eligible is huge.
That'd be true. That'd be true. The area we're hurting in and trying to get people, we talked to, it's Mary Devon, who you all know. Mary says the number of people going into teacher ed now is down across the system. Didn't get into details, but it said the number coming out is less. So, and the number of people eligible for retirement is very high. It's significant. And this comes into play. Health insurance and our salary, which is 42nd in the nation average, all that plays a role in all that. But we would really have a problem, and it would be science, math, engineering, anything in the tech ed area. Tech ed area is tough to fill, and the number one is special ed. Number one, special ed. That's true. Now, and you can make recommendations at the point you made, if the board so chooses, that we drop the surcharge on hard to fill positions, and we need to define that a little bit, but special ed is always tough, and it's always number one.
Well, I definitely would like to see them, renew the statute that allows that.
Yeah,
I understand the capers thing.
We could say renew the statute, and that's without that, we're in the soup. We're in the soup.
Kathy, would you be ready to make a motion to that effect, or do you want to have time to think about it?
I don't know what other board members think. I mean, I definitely like to see us at least support renewing the statute. Is what I'd like to see us do. So
well, if you want to make a motion, if we get a second, then you can see how many are supportive.
Well, I guess I would recommend that we support renewing the statute allowing districts to continue to employ retired educators.
Okay. Seconded by Dina Horst. Is there discussion? Well, let's see where we stand on this. All in favor, raise your right hand. Okay, I see. Is your hand up?
No, I didn't hear
What was the motion? I'm sorry. What was the motion?
The motion?
That we renew the statute allowing districts to continue to employ retired educators.
Sure. As it is?
Yes.
With the penalty? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, fine. Yeah.
So we have 9 votes?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. See? We can get things done.
We voted on
Thank
something
you.
today.
Thank you. We'll get that in.
Okay, was there any other recommendations or discussion about legislative issues to bring? Okay, well, thank you.
One last thing, and just as a reminder, and I don't know any inside information of any kind, but it's highly likely sometime in the near future the district court case will come down on the base state aid per pupil. I think it'll come down sometime in the near future, and don't know the exact date. They keep pulling the judges off to do other important business, but I know they're working pretty hard on it, and they hope, and I imagine we'll have it in the near future, whatever that means.
Okay, thank you, Dale. Our next item of business is to approve the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Sally Cobble, seconded by Ken Willard. Is there discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries. Now somewhere I have a motion for executive session. Let's try 30 minutes, beginning at 5 o'clock. Huh? Just the board? No.
Madam Chairman, I would like to move a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters of non-elected personnel in order to protect the privacy interest of individuals to be discussed. Excuse me. The session will last no longer than 30 minutes, and there will be no action taken during the session. The motion is made by Sally Cobble, and we would start.
Because there's something else we need.
Okay, and we'll go in at 5:05. You need a second.
I want to discuss. Oh, yeah. Seconded by Kathy Bush. All in favor of the motion?
Now, we don't have the attorney in here, is that
No.
right? Okay.
I don't think so. No, because we're going to... Okay. That carried, and we have a few minutes. We're going to come back in at 5:05.